How's everyone doing? Thank you for joining us here on Bengals Army. We got Chris, Tony, and myself, and we got the one and only Parker Blake.
Yes, sir.
We'll golf clap for him.
Welcome,
How we doing, Parker?
I'm living the dream, buddy. I'm here to talk ball, and that's the best time of day, man. So I'm living the dream.
Yeah. How is it out west right now? Is it pretty nice weather?
It's been pouring rain for like all day today, and it was cold all weekend. But we're getting to spring, so it's 80 degrees one day, and then it's 40 and rainy the next. So we're gonna work through this one, and then we'll be into summer.
Yeah, it was nice out today, man. I gotta enjoy the day. I was off. I was putting a goat pen up, and then my daughter had her first soccer practice. So as you can imagine, a bunch of 3 and 4-year-olds running around. It was complete chaos, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. What about you guys? You guys get to enjoy the day?
Absolutely, man. It's been beautiful. Parker, remind me, where are you out of?
Salt Lake, Utah. Yes, sir.
Salt Lake. Okay. Yeah, I was in Arizona last week, man. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's been super nice down there, and it's like, Idaho's been getting hammered, but we're just in the middle. So we're getting the heat one day, and then all the liquid the next day. We're just out here in the middle. I feel like everybody's
getting a hockey team out there sometime soon, right?
Yeah. It's actually going to be right next to the school I coach at.
Nice
arena, allegedly.
And what school is that?
Summit Academy High School, just over in Bluffdale.
Nice.
So I guess I got to decide if I want to be a Coyotes fan or if I want to be a Golden Knights fan still. I've got a big decision coming. So.
Well, wait. If we're talking hockey real quick, just a quick snippet. I believe they're trying to maybe change the name of the Yotes to like the Yetis potentially.
I have zero information, but I'm all for it.
I'd be sick. So
Parker, out where you live, there's a guy by the name of Dolan Halker. You familiar with that kid, the tight end?
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about him? Because I feel like he could be a sleeper in the later rounds. I know we're going to talk offensive line, but I just wanted to kind of pick your brain on this cat because he only really had one good year of production. He had some injuries. You got any good feelings? You think he has potential, even as maybe a little older prospect?
Yeah, the age thing's never been a big thing on any of my boards. Whether you're 24 or 23 doesn't affect a lot in the grand scheme of things, at least, as far as what I'm doing with my draft stuff. I'm not worried about having to pay these guys in 4 years, so I don't really care how old you are. Obviously, younger is better for that reason, and a lot of people talk about the development. But I think, he's got the want to, right? Like he's out there trespassing on his own field, working the jugs machine with his wife, and he's just out there doing everything he can to get better and better. I wish he was a better blocker, but I think he does just enough to, it's workable, it's passable, and I think he's a much bigger threat as a receiver than people give him credit for. So I'm a big fan of Holker. I know he's pretty polarizing. As much as you can be for a later round prospect, but some people are really low on him, and I just don't see why you'd be out on a guy like that.
I agree. He's got some hands, man. Obviously, like I said, his production in the past few years maybe wasn't as great or what you'd want to see, but last year he had a great year. I think he had 700, almost 800 yards. If I do need to look that back up, but still he had a good year. A lot of his catches were great hands catches. He got up after it. He was a guy that I just wanted to bring up to see what your thoughts are. But
for sure, reliability is such an underrated trait when you're looking at, receiving ability with tight ends. You got the guys that are making these big plays or they got the yak ability, but if you have the higher drop rate, or you can't just be like that sure target on 3rd and short, 3rd and medium, or even in the red zone, your value drops a lot in my eyes. But I know some people don't take that as much into account, but that's where, you can see that in a lot of my tight end rankings I'll do year over year, where I'm always higher on the guys that I feel like I can trust more, which is funny because I'm not trusting them with anything personally. But that's just how I evaluate the position, where if I got to be able to rely on you in those situations because that's what that role is in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I'm going to read you something that Mon from Bengals Pulse, he texted me about an hour ago. And this was a tweet from Warren Sharp. He said, last year the Bengals played the NFL's #1 toughest schedule. They played 11 games versus playoff teams, most in the NFL since 2000. They were 4-7 versus playoff teams and 5-1 versus non-playoff teams. They played 14 games versus teams over 500. That's tied for the most since 2000. And this year they have the sixth easiest schedule. So that, to me, seems like we have a lot more success than maybe even us Bengals fans gave them credit for last year. Playing a lot of really good teams, the toughest schedule since 2000, and still almost making it to the playoffs. But yeah, I just wanted to read that. Do you have high hopes for them, Parker, this year with the sixth easiest schedule? Do you think that's going to matter, even though the Bengals kind of play to their level of competition? Sometimes, and other times they might blow some teams out of the water like we did the Ravens a couple years ago.
Hey, I feel like the running joke that at least I've been trying to push is that the Bengals are one of the best teams in the NFC, man. They just keep sweeping these whole divisions in the NFC. But I think it's always interesting to me because their division's just so tough. So having like the sixth easiest schedule, I think really just speaks to that fourth place schedule that they're honestly blessed to have coming into next year, just out of all the rough circumstances they went through last season and that really tough schedule that they were able to still produce with, going through losing player XYZ, whoever you want to talk about. I mean, I think if you don't have hope for this team, even if there's zero improvement from roster last year to this year, they should automatically perform better if they did that well against that tough of a schedule with all those, with all the with all of the issues they ran into last season. So
I agree.
Yeah. One of the things with the strength of schedule is that like last year we started to see a little bit, but this year I think there's so much shakeup in the league, so many stars moving to different teams, so many teams looking to offload big contracts and that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be a lot different to say, that fourth place schedule might mean a little less depending on to start the year, we might have the sixth weakest schedule, but when it gets into it, are some of the teams, some of the fourth place teams going to be able to turn it around because of all of the wild moves that the offseason has seen so far and kind of the different things that are going to come with that. And I wanted to say the lighting situation here is really just not great right now. I don't know. Both of the lights in my room are deciding to flicker on and off a little bit. So I'm sorry about that.
No, you're just over there in the club partying it up, brother. I think one of my favorite things to watch throughout the season is the strength of schedule because, they'll have – I don't remember who it is. It might be Warren, but they track it, week over week and see, whose schedules are getting tougher throughout the year, whose schedules are getting easier. And I feel like – that's a great point where there's a lot of these teams that are at the back end of some of these divisions that made a lot of really big moves or they had injuries last year. Just how the NFL works. It's crazy how some of these teams can really jump from worst to first or really get in that conversation. So I'll definitely be interested to see what the, strength of schedule looks like coming into, week 9, 10, 11.
Parker, outside of the Bengals, is there any team on your radar that you think could make a jump like that?
Everyone's going to be picking the Texans, but I think the team that I'm really excited to watch is the Colts because I was a big fan of Anthony Richardson. I think they're in prime position to get a guy like Brock Bowers, and I've always talked about how there's always a jump in fantasy production. I know we're not talking fantasy football, but if you just want to win your leagues, you want to play the tight end that has either the backup quarterback or the rookie quarterback because that's the built-in safety valve that these teams are using to give these guys the easy check down option or even the primary read on some of the easier concepts and just to help them get in the groove. And I think if they're able to get a Brock Bowers on that team with just the trajectory that I saw them being on, I'm really excited for what they're going to be able to do with Josh Downs and AR-15 and then hopefully Brock. So
did you guys see that Philly just re-signed? I forget that guy's the wide receiver, but they signed him to a 3-year, $75 million. The Alabama kid,
Devonta Smith. Yes, sir.
Yeah. what do you think that would mean for T? Because speaking of the Colts, they got a guy that was picked around the same time as T, in Michael Pittman Jr. So what do you think contract-wise for T? Around that $25 million a year, do you think there's something the Bengals could possibly get done now that Devonta Smith just got his?
You got to imagine his market's similar, right? Where it's going to be in that low to mid 20s range AAV. The big issue is just the guarantees, and where you got a guy like Mulligetta pushing for the big guarantees, as he should. That is his job to do, as annoying as it could be for front offices and fans. I mean, that's what he's there to do. So I would imagine his value is very similar to what Smith got. And if they are still working or they're hoping to work towards a long-term extension, that would be kind of the range you're looking at, the structure you're looking at, just because I see them having similar value to their respective teams.
Yeah, I think T's worth that, man. $25 million. I think Smith got $50 million guaranteed. So, if you're paying T 20-some million right now, and then next year tack on another 20-some, you're almost at that $50 million. So, to me, I would like.
They're paying AJ Brown too. So all the people that are saying you can't pay two receivers, I think they just prove that you can, right? But the back end is the Cincinnati Bengals. We all know they're going to re-sign Jamar Chase at a max number. I think they're thinking about, okay, can we get similar production and gain maybe some draft picks from T. Higgins, as opposed to paying both those guys? I just see them taking the latter, even though I'm rooting for them to keep both of them, obviously.
All right.
Yeah. For me, I think the issue would be like with Mulligetta and with pushing, because I would say personally that T's value should be a little higher than Devonta Smith, just because of the different element that he brings. I think Devonta Smith is going to be more of a kind of boomer bust downfield guy, where if a team can kind of scheme him out of it a little bit, you're okay with him finishing the game with like 6 catches for 75 yards and without scoring a touchdown, something like that. So he's a guy that I think can kind of like get his, but where he really makes a difference is the big play down the field, whether it's after the catch or he beats somebody deep and gets open. And with T, I think that when he's healthy, he's just such a matchup nightmare because of that massive frame, his ability to go up and just high point the ball and take it off of a DB's head is incredible. So when he's on, I think if you're paying him for that potential, you're going to be looking at something that's a couple $1 million higher than what Devonta Smith brings to the table. The problem that I think you run into is instead of looking at paying these two guys $50 million a year, now with T and Jamar, you're probably looking at paying these two guys $60 million a year. So that's kind of where the breakdown happens in my eyes, is that I've said it before, but like you want guys to like take less a little bit to stay with the team, and because of outside variables that in my opinion have like a monetary value versus just get as much money as you can, go wherever you can. Like you're in Cincinnati, the ownership is going to treat you like a family. The Midwest is low cost of living. The Bengals are a contender. So like, could you go get more money somewhere else? Yeah, probably. Are they going to be a contender? Who knows? But with that additional $10 million, like it only works if everybody does it. So like if T were to take that $25 million a year deal, I would say that they'd probably be looking for Jamar to be around 30 million next year instead of around probably 32 or 33. So this is all just speculation in my head and all the numbers that I've tried to work out to, I want to keep Jamar. I want to keep T because I think that the Bengals have always had that duo of receivers, in my lifetime since at least the late 80s, through today. So I'm still hoping, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed, but once those numbers start creeping up higher and higher, the more wide receivers that sign, the higher T's number is going to go. So
for sure. And I mean, that's where you got to remember the value today is always going to be less than tomorrow. So, I mean, if we're looking at 33 for Jamar today, I mean, who's to say it's not 35, 36, 37 next year? So, I mean, if you can get T locked up. You got to try and get on that extension early, but Jamar's got no incentive to sign it early. So you're going to be paying your quarterback 50 plus at some point. Are you going to be paying both your receivers a combined, same range, or are you going to try and front load one, back load the other? The contract stuff's always been so interesting to me, but I mean, because there's just so many ways you can, manipulate it. You can be like the Saints, or you can be like the Bengals, whether relative to cap health, but just, contract situations are always fun to watch. And, there's so many variables that go into it. And like you talked about, are you paying for the upside? Are you paying for what you're going to get? Are you paying the T Higgins that's making crazy acrobatic touchdowns against the Vikings? Are you paying against the T Higgins that is missing X amount of games throughout the year, or, hit or miss as far as how much you're able to actually use him in games? And it's just, it's a crazy game. It's a crazy game.
And that's where I think the negotiations probably get a little ugly too, because obviously, T and T's agent are coming at it with the like, oh, well, when we're there, we're giving you guys the X factor. And the Bengals are probably like, well, you've missed, 4 games this year and 6 games last year and 4 games the year. So it probably all sounds like it's like an attack, but that's where I would hate to be in those negotiations. I always find it super interesting as well, but I would hate to be the one that's like making that decision, having those conversations and trying to tell a guy like, yeah, we really want you and we really want to pay you a lot of money, but we can't because X, Y, and Z. So
today's price isn't yesterday's price, baby. It's going to be. I think Pusha P put that in a song back in the day. So let's get what everyone's here for right now. Parker Blake's O-line takes. Parker, a guy like Mims, everyone goes, raves about his size, his the way he looks. He holds his weight well, and he's still an incredibly large man. His big concern is obviously the lack of games, but the games that he has played looks like he could do really well. I guess, how do you feel about Mims overall? If he's a guy there, say he's the top rated offensive tackle on the board, do you think we could find better value somewhere else? Maybe a Johnny Newton or a Byron Murphy or something like that? Or do you think Mims is worth that risk at pick 18?
I mean, first off, I'm team. If Johnny Newton's on the board, you turn the card in. I don't care who else is there unless it's Quinyon Mitchell. But I've got to say, I think my take on Amarius Mims is probably my least favorite take of the entire class, because if it's me in the room, I'm making the picks. I'm not picking Mims because I've always been a floor guy. I want to take the guy, especially if I'm rebuilding a unit or trying to turn over a unit like they're trying to do at this right tackle position to get the long-term guy in there. I want to get a guy early on that I can trust the floor. And, maybe he's not beating out Trent Brown this year, but I feel confident of what I'm going to be able to see from him and progress with him this season. And then coming into next year, I can expect, X, Y, and Z out of him. And Mims just doesn't have that. I have no idea if he's going to be, a rookie all-pro, or if he's going to be a guy that's struggling to stay healthy, or just maybe he's just too hit or miss and isn't consistent enough to, earn the job. And there's just too many unknowns. And I totally get, swinging for upside, but I'd rather swing for upside on, day 2, day 3, or even more specifically like round 3 plus than, with the 18th pick, when, especially in the Bengals situation, when are you going to be picking at 18 again? If you're really looking at this as the Bengals front office and we're picking at 18 this year, we don't expect to be picking in the teens for the next, 3, 4, 5 years minimum, right? And so when I'm looking at that 18th pick, I don't want to take a guy that I feel like could be a shot in the dark, especially in a class like this where I've talked about where I think the tackle class is a little overrated, but I think it's overrated in the fact that everyone's talking about all the star power. And I think there's a lot of really solid floor players, a lot of really solid guys that are going to be able to come in and compete for jobs day one, where I'm not taking the chance on a guy like that at 18. So I'm not taking him at 18, but all that said, if he's the pick at 18, I'm going to be excited anyway, because I'm just going to be rooting for that ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. I think we all are going to root for whoever the Bengals take for the most part. We might bitch and complain a little bit, but for the most part, they're a Bengal. We're gonna root for them. But yeah, Mims, man, just the lack of overall production. And also not being a O-line guru to know, all these great traits that people might see outside of his height and weight. I'm not a fan. It's just kind of sticking to more of these top tier dudes. Fuaga and JC Latham. Those are two guys that seem like they could be in that area. For us, which one do you prefer, and why would you prefer one or the other?
I've been lower on Latham than consensus, and I've been really high on Fuaga since I first watched this film. And then I'm not necessarily on the West Coast, but I'm in the more Western time zone. So I was eating up those Pac-12 after dark games, and Fuaga's just flashing. No matter who he was going against, who they were playing, what the situation was in the game, he was just nonstop, and that motor don't quit. And I project him a lot better as a guard, just because I do think he can struggle in true pass sets at times, just from a length perspective. But just his desire to just go and bully people is exactly what you want out of a guy that's playing your right tackle position. I mean, I know you don't really have the true blindside tackle anymore in today's modern football, but when you have a guy on your quarterback's vision side, where your right-handed quarterback, your right tackle, I'm not necessarily as worried about him being really tuned up as a pass protector if he's going to just be an absolute mauler in the run game. That's what Fuaga is. I would love, to see him come in and maybe bump one of these guards or compete for one of these guard spots in year one while we have Trent Brown, and then maybe move out to that tackle spot, or maybe he can find a way to stick there and then go get another high-level prospect to tackle, maybe even later in the draft, because there's a lot of guys I love later. But I just don't love Latham's ability to recover laterally. I think he struggles, and that's why I really wanted to see him test, because just based on his film, I didn't really see the athletic profile show up. But I said the same thing with Cooper Beebe, and then he tested like a freaking crazy athlete. So if he was able to do that, I can see the potential. If Latham would have been able to put up some numbers that I could be like, okay, well, let me go rewatch the film. Maybe he's just not, needing to be put in these situations. He's not needing to recover like that. But I don't love how Latham plays outside of his frame so much with that length. You like to see him stay a little tighter, not get as grabby, because I feel like he knows that one of his biggest strengths is his play strength and his grip strength. So he tries to get hands on early, and then he'll just lock on. He doesn't care if you get, side to side or outside of his frame. I worry about him having holding issues at the next level, especially with a limited athletic profile. So I'm definitely, Fuaga is the choice for me out of those two. I'm just way higher on him than Latham. But, I mean, they definitely both have their pros and cons.
Yeah, I like Fuaga a lot. He was one of the first guys I kind of watched, and I just kind of stuck behind him for a while. And who knows, it might have been you that talked about him. I've seen on Twitter. I'm like, oh, let me check this dude out, And he was a guy that I've just kind of stuck with and hope he stays there. Pork Chop says, do you think that there's any way we could package a first round pick and a third round pick to move up to get Alt?
Hey, based on the charts, based on the value charts, it's only going to take 18 and 49. I think we all know that's not true. But that's what the draft value trade charts all say, but those never work. But
yeah, I would be more shocked if the Bengals did it than if another team was, going to be able to move up. Like Duke Tobin and Mike Brown, they love them draft picks, man. There's, the only time they ever trade up is for rarely for a second round when you get good value and only have to give up a fourth or a fifth. And then later on in the draft, they'll be like, well, we filled most of our spots, so let's give up these 2 7th rounders for a late 6th rounder or something like that. Because
we all know they're going to do that. Like we know that they'll never trade up in the first round. But I guess I'll ask you this: like you talk about Fuaga a lot, right? Do you think there's that much of a separation between him and a guy like Joe Alt? I mean, obviously we know that Notre Dame produces a product of tackles, of offensive linemen, obviously tight ends. But do you really think that it would even be worth, assuming they would do something like this, which we know they're not? Is it worth it? And there's that much separation between a guy like Joe Alt and Fuaga?
I mean, I have Alt in this tier of his own. I think no prospect is a sure thing. You should never say a prospect is a sure thing, no matter if you think they're generational or not. But I think just with how refined he is technically, paired with his, just frame and athletic profile, he just checks all the boxes. He went to Notre Dame, which is known, for being able to develop their offensive linemen and have success at the next level. And I just I'm so high on Joe Alt, and I think he is just so far above even the second or third guy in this class that I think, especially, I mean, if it's just a first and a third, I'm making that deal all day. Like I said, I mean, if I could get, the first and second, 18 and 49 and go up to 7 and just take him if he's available, or 8 if he's available, then I'm sending that in ASAP. Like, not have to think about it. I'm going up and getting him just because I do think he is that far above, but it's not even related to like his value in this class specifically, but just over the last few years, we've seen a tackle talent that's come out and kind of what the issues have been and how they've succeeded or failed. And I just feel like he is in a tier of his own, and I feel very confident with what he's going to be able to do right out of the gate. I feel like he has that left-right flexibility. You got to assume he's going to be a higher football IQ guy. The game looked really slow for him at Notre Dame. He checks all the boxes for me. I wish he was a better finisher. I wish he would, really get after guys, kind of like the Fuaga mentality. But overall, I'm in on Alt. So yeah, whatever. I was joking way back a couple months ago, just sell the farm, just go get Alt and go home. That's all you need.
Dusty, you're muted.
I bet it was a great point though.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So what I was saying was, if you have the chance to protect number 9 on his left and right side, that we're talking about for like the next 3 to 5 years, even 10 years with a guy we draft. Obviously Orlando Brown, who knows after this contract what's actually going to happen, but for the next few years we get that locked up. I think that's worth a second round pick. Like if you take 49 and move up 5, probably more than 5 spots to get Alt, but you move up 8 spots, 10 spots, and you get this guy that you can lock in, and he's going to be quality, and it gives us depth. So maybe something happens because Trent Brown, he can play both sides, so we have versatility there. I just think it makes the line a lot better. I'd be all for trading up. Do I think they'll do it? Probably not. But like Tony said, do you think maybe Fuaga, like say Fuaga's there around pick 13 or so, and you think he's going to be gone by 15, would you be willing to trade up for a guy like Fuaga, a handful of spots just to make sure you secure that pick?
I mean, that's where it gets interesting, because you also have to look at, who's drafting around 18. Are you worried about getting jumped? Like, what do you think the drop off is? I mean, I'm all for moving up a few spots to get, it's Fuaga. It's Fuaga. It's Fuaga.
I always say Fuaga too.
Talisa Fuaga. But
I think Fuaga's better, personally. Sounds
I agree. Cool. We'll make him change it. I'll call him up, dude. Just fix this for us. It's messing us up.
It's like Congo Vailoa, it's all the island names.
Got to have that N in there. But anyway, yeah, I think, with just everything that's going on around it, is he worth moving up for, especially a few spots? I think most definitely, but is it, value-wise worth hopping that few spots to get a guy when there could be value later? You could still have a guy like Newton on the board, maybe a guy like Bowers on the board. Like, there's too many variables. I just don't think, especially in the first round, I'm hopping up with a guy where I still feel like he has some flaws. I'd probably just hope he falls to 18, just because, again, with the teams that are around 18 and just in front of the Bengals, I think he has a potential to slide. I mean, there's been, the simulators and the people talking about, the draft, where if the Titans take a receiver, the Chargers trade out, and the Jets take Brock Bowers, then maybe you have Joe Alt sliding all the way into like the teens somehow, and some of these crazy scenarios that we've all seen happen, every draft. So It's one of those spots where I'm probably okay just sticking, because if he has slid that far, there's probably also other value there, just what the Bengals should be looking for.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. One of the things, especially with this draft, I think you could see, 4 quarterbacks, Brock Bowers, 2 corners, an edge guy. So we're already at 8 players there. And then let's say one team has Olufashanu over Joe Alt, or, like at a certain point, some of these tackles just have different traits. They have different abilities. They're kind of like their prospect profile kind of looks a little different where, some guys you're like Amarius Mims, you're shooting for a ceiling. Some guys like Fashanu, it's like, is he going to be a guard right away? Is he going to be a tackle? A lot of people have Olu Fashanu up there, like in the same tier as Joe Alt. Like, whenever it comes down to it, it's what does the one individual team who has that pick, what do they want? Because if they pick a guy and then Joe Alt ends up sliding to 12, let's say Olu Fashanu gets picked first and now we're at pick 10 and Joe Alt is still there. Is that the scenario where the Bengals kind of start looking to trade up? It's one of those things where it's like the draft, crazy things happen every year. Guys fall every year that we don't think that they should fall or that we heard that they weren't going to fall. And it's all this, they don't call it lying season for no reason. So it'll be interesting when the day comes around. It'll be awesome.
Well, and that's the fun part, right? Because it's like, well, maybe, you don't like Mims individually, but Mims could be, he could be the first offensive tackle off the board at 5. Like he could be the guy at 7. I mean, and then all these people talk about Fautanu lately, and it's like, well, how high is he going to go? Graham Barton. I mean, Latham would be the second tackle off the board. Fashanu could fall all the way down to 3, and then now Alt's just in a spiral. Like it's just it only takes one team. It only takes a couple teams to be on the same page as far as where they have their guys stacked, or even if it's a scheme fit. Because like I said, I don't really love, Fuwanga as far as a fit for the Bengals. I think Latham's a better fit schematically, so maybe they have, Latham a couple spots above him, so they wouldn't be willing to move up the couple spots if he was able to fall into, the early teens because they don't see him as a great fit, so they're more willing to just sit back and hopefully he slides, and they're willing to pick him up at that spot, but they're not necessarily going to move for him. So that's what makes the draft fun,
I agree. We got a couple questions in the chat. We'll do a couple rapid fires here on these bad boys real quick. Greg says, Houday Army. Parker, what's your take on Garrett Greenfield out of North Dakota State?
Draft guy Jared and I were DMing back and forth about Garrett Greenfield because he was watching some Mason McCormick, and I was jealous because I hadn't gotten my hands on any South Dakota State film this year. But then we talked about it. I found some film, went back and watched. I was like, hey, have you watched Greenfield yet? Because I know he put up these crazy – he had an elite, 10-yard split and then broad and vertical. So I'm like, he's grading off the charts as far as like explosive metrics. Like, did it show up? And he's like, oh, I haven't watched yet. And so we both just popped it on. And I think it was, maybe 15 minutes later, he's like, I'm 3 plays in. I just saw him get thrown by this defensive end I don't know out of UNI. Is this guy really worth watching? And I'm like, I mean, Dane's got him as a 6th, 7th rounder. So maybe we could just watch him if he ends up as a Bengal. So don't love the guy. I do love the testing profile, but it didn't really, in the couple of drives I watched today, did not show up on film. So I'm not excited about that guy, but definitely worth a swing just, based on metrics. Same thing with, Crum out of Wyoming.
Then we got another one here by our buddy Mon. Mon says, Houday, let's talk about Zach Frazier. So any thoughts on a guy, maybe center guard versatility? What do you think about Frazier?
Zach Frazier's my guy. He's been my guy since I saw his film for the very first time. I have him as center 1. I have him as like interior offensive line, like 2 or 3. I love his game. I love what he's about. I love the, just athletic history he has. I love the IQ that you see on film. And then the motor, the finish, the tenacity, the aggression, like he's just everything you want out of an interior O lineman. I'm sure I would love to see some more weight on him, maybe a little bit more length. He's a shorter, smaller type of guy, but he moves so well. He's great at getting to the second level, getting in the way of linebackers and then displacing linebackers, let alone, helping out on double teams in the front. And I think my biggest criticism of his, this is only a center thing for me, but I just wish in pass pro he was more patient and could just stay square for a little longer. He'll always work to the slide, and then after a couple steps, if nothing really develops soon, he's looking to, go get some ribs, which is great. But in the NFL, when you have these slower developing games, especially on the line, not even talking like blitzes or anything, but just these slow developing games off the edge. It's just like, man, I worry about him getting turned and just, trying to go level a defensive tackle with the DN just coming right through the back door without him even knowing. So that's my biggest critique of his game. But outside of that, I love everything else he has to offer. Like I said, he's one of my guys. I'm hoping to draft him for my shadow team. Just a big fan of Zach Frazier.
So I got a little scenario for you, Parker. We have, because I think somebody said something about rounds 2 to 4. Yeah. So Greg said they don't get offensive tackles. So say we get Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton, one of these guys in round 1, and then round 2 we get a guy like Zach Frazier. We kind of bolster the interior line and also get our replacement at center for the years to come, right? And then round 3 comes around, we still don't have an offensive tackle. Is there a guy there, maybe a Blake Fisher, a Pooney? Because I believe Pooney played almost, he's kind of like Barton. Didn't he play every position on the offensive line?
So Pooney played left tackle at Kansas. However, NFL teams have been working him out as a guard and a center. He played both down in Mobile. He played a lot of center down in Mobile, which I thought was really interesting because the first time I saw him roll out there, I thought he was just, snapping to get, the work in with NFL coaches there. But he got reps through the entire week and even in the game at center. And so I think he has that 5-position flexibility. I can't remember off the top of my head kind of his playing history, but I will say he looked really good at, all 3 spots, left tackle to center that he played. I didn't love his film as a tackle, so I'm glad he got bumped inside. And I know he's working out with Duke. He's working all 5 spots. I'm a big fan of Pooney. I loved him when I went down to Mobile, saw him for the first time. His family stayed in the same hotel I did, so I got to know them pretty well, and that was kind of fun. And I think he's a great player. I still have him slated as a day 3 guy, just because I worry about his athletic profile. I don't think he's a great mover. He's a really strong kid, but he just doesn't have that lateral athleticism. I can see a team taking a shot on him in the 3rd round, but I'd wait till probably the 4th, 5th to, take that swing.
Okay. Really? Yeah. That seems a lot further back than, maybe the consistency on most draft simulators and maybe other people. But sure, when you get to the mid rounds, things get weird. Like, people that you think are going to go in the 5th round, they might go in the 3rd or vice versa or whatnot.
Yeah, you get guys like DeJuan Jones going from the 1st to the 4th or the 6th or the wherever he ended up going. It's just, I talked with somebody about it a couple of days ago, but it's funny because if you have any kind of like off the field red flag that pops up, you're automatically a 4th round pick. Obviously there's scenarios where that's not true and teams are willing to take that risk because of the upside. But it's just funny how that works because, it could just be you have a 1st round profile, but then you're kind of an idiot or whatever it might be, or you have, work ethic issues. We've heard all the 15,000 different storylines there can be, but it's
insert Rondé Sweat.
Yeah, insert Devondre, exactly. And now all of a sudden you're a 4th round pick. You might be the first pick of the 4th round, but you're going to slide all the way to the 4th just because of that one thing you did that one time or that one thing that you said that came off wrong. And that's always been a funny thing to me because for every slider, there's a riser. So you got to wonder who's going to start popping up. Is it going to be this guy like Blake Fisher or Rosengarten or some of these other guys that have a more, maybe not high ceiling profile, but they have a more developed and, high floor profile because the NFL is a conservative league. I know people don't like talking about the boring picks. They want to, the guys that are going to be, is this guy going to be a future All-Pro? But I think the NFL really does value those guys that can come in and they're just consistent. They can be a steady force, especially when you're talking about the offensive line. That's where, again, you got these guys like Cooper Beebe. If you got a guy like Sweat sliding, how far up does Cooper Beebe match that, bumping up? So,
yeah. And I think you used Rosengarten as he's the perfect example of this because 6 months ago, how many of us really outside of diving into specifically O-line prospects, how many of us knew oh yeah, this guy's going to be a day 1 or 2 pick. And now you see him climbing all the way up to there have been expert mock drafts where he's sneaking into the back half of the 1st round. So what do you think of a guy like Rosengarten? And what do you think of who do you think that has not gotten as much coverage, not gotten as much love from the media, has the ability to jump up and maybe be a late first or like a second round pick that you're hearing not much about?
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Rosengarten. Jared put me onto him. I kind of came onto him a little later in the season. So, I was trying to watch the bigger name guys because I didn't do a great job of summer scouting last year. But then it was funny because, you had the national title game and you had everybody. I was sitting there like, oh, this kid's going to go back to school. I actually moved him to my look ahead board because I'm like, there's no way this guy declares after putting that up as his final collegiate game. And then, we move through the process and he declares for the draft. I'm like, oh, I guess now I got to go watch this guy. And as I went through his season and even rewatched that game, I feel like people talk about that national title game for Rosengarten as like this horrible game. PFF graded him terribly. But if you really go in and you watch the game, he really only had a couple bad drives, and they were in the fourth quarter. And this kid, he was 20 during the national championship game. So biggest game of his life as a 20-year-old against this, unbeatable Michigan team. He's getting just obliterated all game, as a team. They didn't play well. We all watched the game, or some of us watched the game at least. So, it just had all this stuff kind of thrown on him, and he was able to this terrible prospect. He actually only had one penalty called on him in that game, and it was kind of a weak penalty. I thought he held up really well against Michigan's really good pass rush. I thought he looked better than Fautanu in that game. I think he's got a more stereotypical tackle profile. He's a very consistent player. He has good length, plays with good pad height. I wish he was a little stronger, but he still anchors really well. He doesn't really get a lot of great movement in the run game, but he moves great out in space. And he checks all the boxes athletically. I wish he was a stronger run blocker, but when he still has the anchor, the play strength is there. You just got to find a way to tap it out, get it out of the tree. So I'm a big fan of Rosengarten, and I've seen a lot of. It's funny enough, early on in the process, like my first, O-line rankings I dropped, I had Blake Fisher like crazy high. And I'm like, dude, everyone's going to tear me apart because it's all about Joe Alt. And I'm just looking, I have a thing with like, if there's a really high level prospect on one side of the ball, whether it's edge, receiver, tackle, whatever it is, always go look at the little brother. So if it's Joe Alt, go look at the other side because that guy's going to be underrated for no reason, but just because they're watching him next to Joe Alt. So I was actually really high. I love what Blake Fisher looked like, back in 2022 when I was watching him come into this year. Then even what he did early on this season, I thought he was really well put together. But he's gotten the hype. People are talking about him, so I got to bring up. I have a hard time with this every time because there's so many guys I just love talking about in these middle rounds and finding a name that a lot of people don't talk about. But I've got it. It's for me, it's probably Delmar Glaze from Maryland.
Delmar Glaze.
I'm a big fan of Delmar Glaze. Great athletic profile. I think he has guard tackle flexibility. He's got really consistent hands. They're consistently a little too high, but they're very consistent. I think he's really well developed, and I think once he gets into an NFL program, he's really going to come along at a quick pace and can find a way onto the field. But again, whether it's guard or center, I think he has the athletic profile where he can flip sides if need be. He's just the guy I see finding a way to work onto the field. I look back to last season where I was pounding the table for Warren McClendon. I feel like Delmar Glaze is my Warren McClendon of this year, a guy that's going to slide really late in the draft, probably a day 3 guy that's just going to end up popping up and just being like, this offensive line's ravaged with injuries, and Delmar Glaze has played 4 positions this year, but he's played it all very well. So he's kind of like my later round guy. He's not as early. I gotta advocate for my guy Tyler Guyton. If we're talking, day 2 could slide up into day 1. I am a big fan of Tyler Guyton. I know a lot of people aren't. I love the length. I love the athleticism. I love his footwork, his frame, his ability to recover, his ability in space. Again, a guy that has a massive frame that I feel checks a lot of boxes. People are out on him because he's a little older, but he was also playing at Oklahoma with Biedenbaugh, who's like my idol as an offensive line coach. He's done a lot of great things with these guys out of Oklahoma. So I already, you don't want to scout the helmet, but you got to take that into account when it's a legend like Biedenbaugh over there with the Sooners. And I just have a lot of faith in Tyler Guyton, and that's probably the guy I'd pick as far as tackles go to slide up into the first. And obviously got to root for Frazier. I think he's worthy of a first-round pick.
So would you have a problem with trading back in the first and getting Tyler Guyton? Maybe, let's just say pick 25. Around pick 25, would that be about the area you'd look at Guyton?
Yeah, I mean, once you get into those mid-20s, it's really kind of a take your guy type scenario. And that's where, you kind of have that second bucket of guys, right? Where kind of that tier 2 or tier 3, depending on how you have alt on your board, whether, it's the Guyton, Suamataia, I guess Fisher now, Rosengarten, that kind of like group of tackles. I think the ceiling's around, 23 to 25, and then they're all top 40. I think they're all gone by 40. So I think it's unrealistic to think you could wait till 49. So I love the idea. Trade back, try and get a day 2 pick, another top 50 pick, and then just go crazy, go get some O-line in a very stacked class.
This is an interesting topic for me on Tyler Guyton, because for me, just to think about, like, I've seen a couple mocks where Tyler Guyton has gone to the Bengals at 18, and not diving that deep into film myself, that's one of the things where I'm like, I don't see that many people looking at this guy as a top 20, top 25 pick. There are all these other tackles that are available. And it's a really interesting thing that you said. You like him down there with the offensive line coach Biedenbaugh. So, like, my question for you would be, if you have that much respect in Biedenbaugh, do you think that he's getting like close to the most that Guyton can give right now? Whereas like if he had a lesser known offensive line coach, do you think there would be like a higher upside essentially? So for me, in my opinion, it would be like, oh yeah, you have so much respect for Biedenbaugh. That would like kind of take away a little bit from Guyton for me to say the other guys in the room are coached well as well. Guyton is probably doing all the right things and getting all the right info from his offensive line coach. But it sounds like you're saying you view that as a great foundation to grow on in the NFL.
Yeah, so I always view college development as setting that base, right? And so then you have your different NFL guys. Some of your NFL coaches are more viewed as like, hey, you're just here to implement the scheme. You can correct little things along the way, but we'll just let them train in the offseason as far as development goes. Or you have guys like Stout that are just going and getting their guy and, creating this masterpiece with it. And so I do view Guyton as having a more solid base just because of where he's coming from. I mean, he was only a starter for 1 year, and Oklahoma, I know, protects their offensive line just schematically. He's not doing a lot of true pass sets, but I think he has the skill set to do that. And again, that's where I talk about I'm a big floor guy. So if I see a guy where, yeah, he's got some technical deficiencies, but I think he's got a really great foundation that he can just stand on. And that's where, when he gets thrown into the fire of the NFL, he's going to revert back to that base, first. He's not going to just jump to his potential, especially as a tackle in the NFL. So you're going to revert to that foundation. And I don't think his technical deficiencies worry me as much as, some of these other guys, especially from the progress I was able to see from his last couple of games of the regular season or the collegiate season. And then all the way up to Mobile where he got down and his hands already looked a lot tighter. He was moving his feet a lot better. He was recovering really well. He was a lot more patient. Like, you can tell he's putting in the work in the offseason. I was able to interview him. I talked to him about that a little bit, which is super cool, about kind of his offseason process and what he's looking to improve on. And he's, really self-aware. He's like, yeah, I have, issue XYZ, but I've already been training that. And this is what I'm doing to correct that. And so just a guy with that mentality. And I think that's kind of why he's become, one of my guys of this tackle group, is because I just was able to talk to him and he has that mentality. And I know everyone pictures these NFL guys as these highly motivated guys that are always trying to be the best guy in their position in the league, but that's just not always the case. You got to have that want to. And I think he does. And I think he's got a good foundation that he is building on. So, but again, I wouldn't love that pick at 18 just because of what I think it'll be there. So if you're going to try and get a guy like that, you're either trying to trade up in the second or you're trading back either to the end of the first or early into the second. So, yeah.
So between Guyton and Burton, so Burton, very versatile guy out of Duke. Who would you prefer out of those two? Because obviously Guyton probably is more of a tackle, but you have a do-it-all kind of guy in Burton.
Yeah, Grant Barton's like, he's what I look for in an offensive lineman, a guy that's willing to play whatever you need him to play, and he can do it. I have heard some people talk about, well, yeah, and he's kind of just a master of none, though. So really, what's he going to look like at whatever position he's able to settle into? And I'm like, when a guy just wants to be on the football field helping his team out, he'll make it happen. And
so that kind of speaks about that's kind of what you speak about, what you said about like the work ethic, in the drive to be better. Not everyone has that. Do you think Graham Barton has that over Guyton, or you think they're kind of similar in their work ethic qualities where they'll push themselves to be the best they can be?
Well, it's like, it's the difference between, does he have the desire to, want to be better and improve, or does he have the desire just to go out there, be the best player he is, whatever that means? Because you have guys that are willing to improve and work on their craft and become the best, left tackle they can be. But if I need to play right tackle, he's going to shut down on me. And that's where kind of the value comes in a guy like Barton, who's willing to just go out there and, hey, coach, I just want to play football, because you just assume that guy's going to be working his ass off because he's trying to get on the field. And so that's where, again, the versatility out of some of these guys is underrated, and I think overrated for others, where you have a guy like Fa'utanu who has very limited reps at just left guard, mostly left tackle, and now you hear people talking about, oh, well, can he play center? Can he play both guards? And I'm just like, he didn't really do that. Where I look at Barton and I'm like, he's played center, he's played guard, he's played tackle. Like, he has experience doing this, and he looked comfortable doing it. So I'm just going to let him go and be versatile until he finds a spot where he settles in, opposed to forcing one of these guys to bump into a position. I talked to Patrick Paul down in Mobile. He's a great example where, he was a left tackle at Houston, had the frame, had the length, but had some, technical deficiencies. And then people were asking, like, hey, this offseason you trained with Duke Manyweather. Are you working, right tackle? Are you working both? Like, what are you working on? He's like, oh, obviously I'm working both. I want to play in the league. And everyone's like, oh, well, are you willing to play right tackle in the NFL? And he was very like, he didn't want to say no, because he's draft prospect. Don't want that getting out. Like, oh, I'm going to limit myself. But he was like, I mean, if I get switched to right, it's definitely going to take some time. And that's kind of like the three different personalities you'll see. You'll have a guy that's like, oh, I know what I can do. I'm just going to do my thing. Hopefully I can find an opportunity doing that. You have the guys that are like, oh, I know what I'm good at. I'm going to try and build upon that and increase my value just through this one avenue, but that's because it's where I fall. Then guys that just want to come out there and play football, they don't care where that is. They're just going to become a better football player. And I think Guyton is, he knows he's the right tackle. I'm sure he's working both sides, but, there's plenty of left tackles, not as much competition at right tackle necessarily. If he's okay in that role and that's what he's comfortable with, I think he can have a pretty good long career doing that. And then you have a guy like Barton who's just, again, going to find a way to go. Just get him in, let him settle in, that's fine. And then you have a guy like Patrick Paul where it's like, this is a left tackle, and that's what he's going to be. So we got to work with that. So
we talked about right tackle, and that comes down to probably the 1-year deal with Trent Brown. If Trent Brown stays healthy, do you think how do you feel about him? I guess do you think he can get back to where he was a few years ago, one of the highest paid tackles in the league, or do you think he's kind of fell off and was like a Lyle Collins? But I think kind of Riley Reef. Like Reef, when he was in, I thought he played pretty well until his injury happened. Do you expect higher upside out of Trent Brown for this year?
I think, your ceiling gets capped at a point, not necessarily because you're going to regress or you can't improve, but just because you've kind of figured out who you are as a football player. And once you have a long enough career, you're maybe not as willing to, branch out, try new techniques, or try and, find that next gear. You're just kind of like, oh, this is who I am. That's where I said it all offseason. Trent Brown was a guy I felt really comfortable signing as like, the sixth man. Like, go draft a tackle, and Trent Brown's the first guy off the bench. He's the guy in your jumbo sets. Like, that's kind of his role. As far as like a starting position, I feel like he's obviously very competent athlete, competent tackle. He's going to do a fine job, but I do worry about the health. I worry about kind of his limitations, but I do think it's, it's interesting because, Trent Brown or Orlando Brown are very similar styles of player where they're going to lose the same way, they're going to win the same way. And I think that's a benefit that you can kind of scheme around and work around because they are similar. Whereas, Orlando Brown and Jonah Williams are two very different styles of tackle. So that was kind of hard to make work. So I don't necessarily think I see him hitting another gear and like getting back to like, oh, he's going to be an all pro. He's going to be this crazy tackle out there in the league. But I do think he can get into the system and make it work for him, and they can work around him and just kind of make it happen. So I do like what he's probably going to be able to do. But the big questions are obviously how long is he going to be able to do it for, and what's the option if we do get to that situation.
That's always been my concern for him as well. I mean, obviously, to your point, the age, the health, right? I mean, I want to see this guy play a full season. The injuries are certainly like a big concern for me. I think like if I'm coming out of this draft, I want to have a guy at that tackle spot waiting in the wings that we're not going to have to scramble and try to find a free agent for next year, right? You want to have that guy coming out of this draft, whether it's in the first 2 or 3 rounds or if it's a late round guy with a lot of upside that you talked about previously, right? You want to have somebody coming out of here where, okay, that year 2, okay, Trent Brown's not here anymore. He's on that short-term deal. Maybe he got injured. Maybe he's just fizzled out, right? He didn't work out. Because to your point again, similar style to Orlando Brown, right? I'm looking for that tackle to replace him next year after this season coming out of this draft.
Well, that's where Patrick Paul could be fun because you have these 2 massive bodies that are, one's a limited athlete, one's not a great athlete, just maybe because it's older, but they both work with these massive frames and they both play on both sides of the, left and right. So you get a guy like Paul in, who's also a big frame, not a great athlete, but isn't as comfortable playing both sides. You can now work with these guys that can be great mentors for a guy like that, so he can more be ready to step in and fill that role next season, opposed to coming in and trying to compete for that job this year. He can take the year to develop and learn and get comfortable where they're going to need him, and then it's just a much more seamless transition. I really do love that idea just because it fits. You're getting similar guys, whereas if you get a guy like Fuanga or Fautanu in, I mean, they're not the same player as these 2 guys, and so it's like when I'm moving on from Trent Brown, I'm now getting a completely different style of tackle in here. What's that going to look like? What's he going to be able to gain from Trent Brown, especially if it's a smaller guy like Fautanu? Like he's small and athletic with great length. Trent Brown's big, solid athlete, uses his strength. And so it's like, how are these 2, like, what's that transition going to look like, after this season? That's where start looking at kind of the profiles. That's what I try and do is look at the profiles they're trying to bring in, what they're trying to work towards, trying to figure that out. That's how you can kind of pin down what they're looking for and maybe even, try and predict some of these picks or see what'll be a good fit.
Yeah, and I just don't want them to play musical tackles the next few years, right? Yeah. I mean, that's my biggest concern. I see that happening at tight end every year. I don't want to be holding my breath every single year being like, okay, who's the guy? Or do we just have a guy like Jonah Williams who we're, so happy with? He gets production, but at the end of the day, is he really a fan favorite? Not really. I just don't want to play musical tackles. I want to solidify that a little bit more because right now, I mean, it's no secret we're going through a restructure on the defense where we're trying to get these rookies some experience. We're trying to get some solid people back there. I just don't want that to happen on the offensive side because at the end of the day, we all know the Bengals are an offensive strength team. They've locked up the skill players. Obviously, some concerns at running back right now, but at the end of the day, we don't want to play musical linemen, right? So.
Sure. So, like Tony just said, with running backs, we might go into the draft, and there's some guys we'd really like to see. Me personally, there's some guys I really like. Jalen Wright, I'm pretty high on him, but Zach Moss, his pass blocking ability. Have you watched any of Zach Moss, Parker, to where you like what you see with him? Do you think he's an upgrade over Joe Mixon at this point, or do you think he's last year was kind of his peaking point and there's not much room to grow after what he did last year?
Yeah, University of Utah alum. I watched him live back in the college days. I always said the Joe Mixon thing was never are you trying to upgrade the player? I always thought It was a scheme fit type deal where I thought, there's the way the offense is moving. They don't need that zone cutback. They need a guy that's able to get, downhill and is willing to just, run his head into a wall until it breaks. And I think that's what they got with Zach Moss. He's not going to be – he doesn't have that crazy breakaway speed, but he does have an impressive ability to, he's hard to get down. He's a slippery back. He can run through guys as well as just make them miss. And I think that's what they need is they needed a guy because they have Chase Brown who can be that explosive option. And then now you have Zach Moss that you can pair that with that can be your more vertical power runner, short yardage runner that's able to just run through a linebacker or a corner every now and then. So I don't necessarily want to say they upgraded, over Mixon, but I do think he's a much better fit for what they're trying to do. So I do have a lot of faith in what he's going to be able to do with that system.
See, you're good at this because my wording was bad, but you covered my wording up, Parker. You made me sound better and smarter than what I was with that. Thank you.
Hey, we've all seen those conversations online. I've learned how to not get trapped in that one.
That's something that we
I
all
wasn't
need
trying
to
to
learn.
trap you.
To what you said, Parker, I think Houston proved that like that's exactly right. Like it's not necessarily we're trying to improve on Mixon. We're trying to get a better player kind of deal, but Houston believed in him enough to like the Bengals were going to release him. Not only did they give an asset to make sure that they were the team that got him, but they also gave him a $9 million, per year, 3-year extension. So they made his contract, $27 million instead of trying to pick this guy up out of free agency because Joe Mixon is a solid running back. He's a solid NFL player and he's good to have in a locker room. And he's still got something to give and something to contribute to a solid NFL offense. So I think that Zach Moss will he definitely has some big shoes to fill, but I think to your point, the scheme fit makes it so much easier for him to just step right in and kind of he's already good and his mindset aligns more with the Bengals offense than kind of what Joe Mixon's aligned with, where Joe was like, I'm going to try to get the breakaway. I'm going to try and make the 4 yards into 20, where Zach Moss might turn 4 yards into 6, but Joe Mixon would end up trying to turn 4 yards into 20 and turn 4 yards into 4 yards. So I think that the tough thing for Bengals fans is, man, we loved Mixon. We love the energy he brought. And we loved the way that he was 100% bought into the team. So I hope that Zach Moss doesn't catch any flack or hate for that. But I think that he could really, really stand out here, especially in an offense that's going to be built for exactly what he's good at: run out of the shotgun, get some pass blocks. He might not end up having many games with 20 plus carries, but you don't really need that with what we're looking with how the Bengals are looking to build this. So I think he could be a great fit. And that's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a Joe Mixon hater. I don't think Zach Moss is going to be an upgrade. What I was meaning is more in the pass blocking. Obviously, he's a little better pass blocking.
Too. Yeah.
So I don't want to, like Parker said, get trapped in all that that Twitter hate that I hate Joe Mixon. I do not hate Joe Mixon. I really one of my favorite Bengals players. And it's sad to see him go, but that was kind of what I was wanting to get across, the fit wise and the scheme and what he can do, what he brings with pass blocking, like what Chris said, run ability out of the shotgun, in which we know Joe likes throwing out of the gun. So that was kind of my part. Parker, do you have any guys that you really like that's not offensive line? Have you watched many other positions, or are you just mainly really just been diving into all these offensive line prospects?
Yeah, so I've committed myself, for better or for worse, to the shadow team thing. So I always try to put together, I call it my top 250 plus. I have 258 names on my board right now. So I've watched a couple guys every now and then. Yeah, I think my favorite, which is so funny, dude, because I think my favorite class just overall outside non-offensive line is this tight end class, which is just hilarious to me because so many people talked about how it was such a weak tight end class. It was Brock Bowers and then nobody that even, was even worth drafting. And, what are we going to do? Tight end class. We went from this legendary tight end class last year to this year where there's nobody. And as I was watching through these tight ends, I was like, holy crap, dude, I like this guy for this reason. I like this guy and what he brings. I ended up liking a bunch of them. It ended up being really hard for me to sort kind of that 2 through 5, 2 through 6 group. But I've really fallen in love with a lot of these tight ends. And I think, a guy like Theo Johnson, everyone's talking about Ben Sinnott, but Theo Johnson's a guy that I really love what he can bring as far as being a run blocker and a receiving body that's sure-handed and then also big frame so he can be that red zone threat. I really feel like he encompasses what I consider, being a versatile tight end. I had this fun conversation with Joe Goodberry the other day, kind of about what versatility means as far as different players, different positions. But when I look at tight end, I want to get a guy that I can put on the field and leave on the field. I don't have to worry about you tipping our hand because you're only a receiving tight end or you're only a blocking tight end, so you're not a receiving threat. I feel like he can do it all. He's not going to do anything, amazingly. He's not going to be like this top tier, does everything perfectly, is unstoppable tight end, but he's going to be a very consistent guy that you can use in different parts of the field, in different roles, and just kind of blends in. He's kind of scheme transcendent is the word that I really love with some of these prospects that I hear on a couple podcasts every now and then, where it doesn't really matter what kind of offense you're running. If you get this guy in and just get him in your system, he's going to make it happen, whatever you need him to do. And so he's a guy that every time I turned on his film, the Penn State quarterback wanted to make me put my head through a wall because he refused to throw to Theo Johnson, but he was fun to watch. He gets open all the time and he can displace dudes in the run game. So I'm big fan of him. Big.
So you think he's worth pick 80?
I would definitely think he's worth pick 80 for sure.
Yeah.
What are some other tight ends that you have on your radar? Because as obviously Bengals fans, we know that like tight end has never really been a position for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years since Eifert was healthy, that we've had a guy that we could really count on, when things got tough to make a big play on third down or to make a big red zone play or something like that. Who are a couple guys for you that you see in like a day 2, maybe 4th round?
Well, I don't have to talk about Cade Stover to all the Ohio people that you are. You got him covered. So we all know who Cade Stover is. I feel like Ben Sinnott's been kind of like pushing for that, consensus tight end 2 spot. I don't really need to talk about him. They're both earlier guys, but I talked about Theo. There's Eric All that I feel like is if you have a tight end that you feel good about, you can go get him, let him heal up, let him learn the system. He's another kind of all-around guy. I think he's more of a receiver than a blocker, but coming out of Iowa, so is Sam Laporta. He seems to be doing just fine, and Eric All is the bigger body. I'm pretty high on him, but I think, my favorites in this group, I've been really high on Theo. I love A.J. Barner out of Michigan. Obviously, don't scout the helmet. Just go watch the tape. He's another guy you can just throw on the field, leave on the field. He's going to get done for you. If you're looking for that explosive receiving option, Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona, I feel like every time the ball was in his hands, he was trying to do his best Brock Bowers impersonation and just get off to the races. He's not a great blocker, but, man, he's got yak ability like I feel like none of these other tight ends outside of the number 1 guy can do. And he's not afraid of contact. That's my biggest issue with Jatavion Sanders. I know a lot of people are really high on him. I just am not, because if you watch the film, he's just soft. It feels like he's afraid of contact. He doesn't get physical with guys. He's kind of running around linebackers. He gets displaced really easy. He doesn't stick to his route. He kind of just bends it around, again, avoiding contact. Not a great blocker in line or in space. He's kind of just a receiver for you, but he's not really amazing at that. I don't really get the hype on Sanders, never really have had to get that out there. But I think the guys that I've been in love with the whole process are Theo Johnson, A.J. Barner, McLaughlin, and then Brevin Spann-Ford's like a 7th round UDFA type guy out of Minnesota. Big body, again, can kind of do it all.
Hey, you forgot Holker, man.
Holker's fun, but like I said, he's not a guy. I feel like he's a guy you play in the slot. He's like a smaller Gesicki where you just let him kind of be a receiver. Maybe you put him in as like an H-back, but he's probably going on a route. You can probably trust him to run like some split zone for you, but he's not going to be a great blocker like some of these other guys are. But I think, he's higher up on the board because of that receiving upside that he has. And again, the sure-handedness. So he's not my flavor, but a big fan of him still, because if I were to pick a receiving tight end, it's going to be Dallin Holker just because I can trust him. He's not just a receiver. He's still that tight end body, physical player that is going to, make it happen.
So what about the TCU kid, the dude that's like 6'6",
Wiley, yeah.
Yeah, Wiley. What you have any thoughts on Wiley in Holker? Obviously they're totally different, but would you take, because Wiley's kind of been climbing up the boards, it seems like, and he seems like a dude that could maybe be a sleeper for people that maybe lesser known, like focusing on tight ends. Do you think he's got really good upside, good traits, or do you think you would prefer a Holker in the 5th, 6th, maybe over a Wiley in, let's say, the 4th round?
Wiley's been so fun to watch because like he started off as like this, like late day 3 guy, just see where he falls. Maybe he's a UDFA. And I feel like he shot up and was like a bunch of people were like, oh, day 2, maybe even the 2nd round. Like, were we willing to take this guy? And then he fell back down. And I feel like they both have similar draft value. It's just if you want, again, do you want the bigger frame that you feel like you can maximize and use in multiple different ways, or do you want the physical slot receiver? And that's where I like Holker better because, again, I feel like I can trust him more. I feel like Wiley, when he gets cold, like you just can't do anything with him. You just kind of have to sit him down and let him breathe a little bit before you can put him back on the field. Whereas Holker's a guy that's going to go out there every down, and you know exactly what you're going to get out of him for better or for worse. I don't think he's got a great ceiling, but I think he's, again, just very consistent, and you know what you're getting, but what exactly are you getting? What's the most that you can get is kind of what holds him back.
Damn, you're speaking my language, buddy. Hopefully, Dale from Bengals and Brews ain't watching this because I don't think he's as high. I've talked to him a little bit, and he likes Holker, but not. He's definitely a Wiley guy. So you're on my side, man. Now I'll have to send him a text and tell him, dude, I need to write my own scouting book out there.
You got to, man. Just put your thoughts down. You'd be amazed. That's what my favorite part about doing, just again this 250 plus prospect board is because I get to come back a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, and just be like, oh man, I was high on that guy. Why was I? Oh, what happened to him? That's again, I really struggle at following through with players. Like I'll watch a player and then they'll get drafted and I'm like, oh, never going to listen, never going to find out what you did. And so I'm trying to be better about following these guys through their, careers and seeing what they turn into. And that's like the fun part about the draft, because I know everyone likes the debate and like, oh, this guy's going to go here. Let me see your mock draft. Like, what do you have going with these guys? But the fun part for me is like, yeah, I really like this prospect. Oh crap, he got drafted by that team. That really sucks for me. Or, oh man, I hated that prospect, but he found the one team that's going to make it work for him. That's like Jaheim Bell, right? Like I feel like there's 3 teams in the NFL. Yeah. If he ends up on one of those 3 teams, he's going to be a superstar. But if he doesn't, then he's going to disappear in like 4 years. So I like
Bell too, man. I like him a lot. Tony, you had a question a little bit ago, and I kind of cut you off.
No, you're good, man. Rapid fire, Parker. I think you know what I'm going to ask. Brock's there at 18. You taking him or no?
Is Newton there or no?
I don't care.
Man.
Let's
say Newton's there, and
if Brock's there, Newton's there. I'll take Brock. If Brock's there, Newton is. If Brock's there, Newton's not. You take Brock. If Brock's there and Newton's there, you take Newton.
Done. Fair enough,
dude. So there's a lot of people that've got Byron Murphy moving above Johnny Newton. So I like Johnny Newton has had production, the past couple years. So it's not as much as like Byron Murphy's kind of more of a 1-year guy. But Murphy also, he can play. He seems a little more versatile where he's not just kind of the pass rusher. What makes you like Johnny Newton so much more than a Byron Murphy?
Yeah, I feel like the Murphy hype is purely just that. I think the NFL is really high on Murphy from just what I've heard and the people I've talked to. And I think it just comes back to the NFL being conservative, right? Like they heard about the foot thing with Newton, like, we'll just let him slide. We'll get him later. But I think if you put their film next to each other, I have them really close as like film grade wise. And I wish I had Newton testing, but we got to wait till tomorrow for that. But I just think he's so much more refined. He's got better hands. He's more explosive off the ball. He's more patient once he gets in the backfield. He's able to attack the mesh point really well. He can generate pass rush. He can get knocked back in the run game. Where I feel like he's more of that explosive, I'm going to make it happen player. Where I feel like Murphy's more of the slow play. Hey, I'll push the pocket. Hey, I'll sit here and I'll take up my gap and not necessarily get TFLs, but limit big gains. And that's where I'm just going to go take the upside on the guy that's just it's almost like the Michael Hall like wow factor, right? Where you just turn on the film and it's like, holy crap, he's just exploding through dudes. Whereas Byron Murphy's just a more methodical player, but again, he's more consistent because doesn't have that boom or bust risk because he's just doing the same thing. He's doing his game, playing his game. I thought he was kind of misused at Texas. I thought they play. I feel like in certain games they played Tavondre Sweat at 3 Tech more than they played Murphy at 3 Tech, and I don't know what they got going on down there. But he's more patient. Really just an interior defensive lineman, not like a playmaker.
Do you think with Sweat being, everyone's super high on Sweat, the true nose tackle of the draft class, right? Do you think that helped Murphy's production in the difference of Johnny Newton? He didn't have a guy that's as highly rated next to him. So what you said earlier, you have the big and the little, you got the left tackle, the right tackle. Do you think that coincides with your love for Johnny Newton? He didn't have that true dude in there with him.
Well, the Sweat thing is funny because I was amazed that he never got the little brother effect. I've always been so much lower on him than consensus throughout the entire process. But then, like you see, Jerzon Newton was that defense last year, whereas you had these different playmakers at corner, safety, D-end, interior defensive line on the Texas defense. That defense is pretty legit. And so you really only needed to do your job, where Jerzon Newton had to go and do his job and then some, but he was able to. And that's where I can see, again, they're very similar, but I'm just going to go get the guy that's willing to kind of put the team on his back and has that confidence of like, oh, I'm just going to go make this happen for my guys. It was fun just because watching his film, you got Texas in all these big games against these big schools, these close games, these really fun, exciting to watch games. And you go to Illinois and it's the fourth quarter and they're down 30 and Jerzon Newton's still going after it like it's the first freaking drive of the game. And he's trying to go make it happen. And it's the stuff like that where I'm like, it's easy to just like, all I have to do is just my job and then let this, kind of come together, opposed to, if my team's not going to get blown out today, I have to go get 75 sacks and 80 TFLs. So maybe I'm buying into the film hype, but he just felt more explosive to me. I loved watching him.
I agree. I really like Johnny Newton a lot. And defensive tackles are getting paid, man. They're getting paid a lot of money. And if you could get a guy like that could step in and be our Geno Atkins for the next 5 years with a 5th-year option, that to me, dude, I like it. I mean, year one, I'm not saying he's going to be Geno or anything like that, but there's upside, and I like it. I'd like that, and then get a Zach Frazier in the second round, then come back with a Blake Fisher. Would that make you feel pretty good?
Yeah, that's a good first 3 picks, man. I mean, don't sleep on some of these wide receivers there in the 3rd round. But I mean, if you're gonna go get trench guys, this is the year to do it. And if you can come out of the first 3 rounds with 3 trench players, whether it's whatever combination of offensive and defensive line, and then maybe a weapon in there, whether it's a receiver, tight end, even a DB, linebacker, running back, just as that 4th pick. I think that's a great first couple of days. That's what I try to always do on my mocks. I feel like it's always like, I'm okay. I'm cool off the tackle. I never pick a tackle in the first. I feel like I do sometimes just to mix it up. I'm always going D-line, or I'm taking a swing at Brock, or even going Brian Thomas Jr. And so, you go get that like star player that you feel like is your guy in the first, and then go get a couple offensive linemen on day 2, and then a skill guy wherever you feel like you need it the most.
And you mentioned DeMar Glaze, who is, let's just say a 5th round guy. So there's definitely options. There's value in the middle rounds if you hit on it. It's about hitting. But like you said, we're not wanting to be at pick 18 too often. So let's get that stud, a guy that's an impact player. And I think Johnny Newton would be an impact player. And you're going to see BJ Hill be like he was when Larry Ogunjobi was there, and he's going to perform a little better and not have all these snaps. And also DJ Reader, he wasn't on the field all that much. Like his overall, and I love DJ Reader, and I wish we could have kept him. But overall, I feel like we could make it work with Johnny Newton in there.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to think about that rotation. You got Rankins, Hill, Newton. Then you got Murphy, Hendrickson, Hubbard, Osai. I mean, you can really starting to platoon. That's what I've been talking about for a couple of years, it feels like now, where the Bengals are one of the lowest rotation teams on their defensive line. You look at if you look at like the high pressure groups, it's these groups of 8 to 9 guys that all have, I mean, your eighth and ninth guys still have like 250, 300 snaps on the year. And just because you're just able to have guys specialize, you're able to have guys in certain packages. Maybe you have your first, second down package, then evaluate, or it's your first down package. And what are we doing on second, third down? You're just able to keep guys not only fresh, but they know their role and they're able to just kind of lean into that and specialize into what they're good at, opposed to being these well-rounded players. Because I think we all know, out of Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, one of them's a pass rusher, one of them's more of the run stopper. Why can't we have, get your run stopping group out there, get your pass rushing group out there where they can all work together. They know what they're trying to do. Again, they have their role. You obviously have your starters who are going to get more snap count, but if you're able to get guys in there and just keep your dudes fresh, keep your dudes focused on their job, their task, their role, that's where real production comes on the defensive front, in my opinion. That's why I wish they would get to.
And how many times did we see Trey Hendrickson coming off the field just exhausted, just, totally spent? And he still had, what do you have, 17 or 19 sacks last year, with really no help. Like, his pressure rate was almost 2 times higher than anybody else on that D-line. That, to me, that's pretty rough. Now, if you get some more rotation like you're talking about and get more of an interior pass rush, he could have easily topped 20 sacks. I truly believe that. And that's what makes me think he's a very top tier, underrated guy, just due to the fact he has no real help outside of himself.
Well, look at some of these games that they ended up, losing at the end, where if they could have just gotten some pressure on quarterbacks. I talk about a Texans game all the freaking time because it's CJ Stroud had all day in the pocket, whether he was extending the play, maybe had to get out of the pocket or they're going play action. But no matter where it felt like he was on the field, he was able to just kind of stand there, and he got some pressure, but he could just hop out of the way. And now he could just hang out again. And you're putting your defensive backs, especially a young defensive back room like the Bengals have, in a very precarious and difficult situation when they're having to cover for 3, 5, 7 seconds, because you're just not going to do that in the NFL. You're just not going to cover these guys for that long. No one is that sticky. No one can maintain their coverage that well. And so being able to get a pass rush that can at least keep these quarterbacks on the move, get them off base, and maybe force some throws, that's really where you eke out. It's like people talk about the hidden yards. Those are the hidden, the throwaway ball or the pressure that turns into a pick, and the kind of the plays like that are hidden along in the season that really turn into a very productive defense, even though you don't really feel it week to week.
Right on. So we got we're about an hour and 23 minutes. I don't know if you want to stay on any longer. If you guys have any more questions we want to throw at Parker, I know we've picked his brain pretty well. He said Parker's a great guy. He said he's got the afternoon open for us. So I will be glad to stay on, but I don't want to burn anyone's clocks.
I think the last thing that I have for you is kind of just to give you a little bit of an open floor. Like, all of us are Bengals fans. I know me, Tony, and Dusty, we're Ohio guys. Like, we've been here. But you're out there in Utah. What does that look like for you? How did you become a Bengals fan? You mentioned your shadow team as well. That's something that I've been kind of interested in the last couple of years. And I've been like almost scared to get into it because I know if I get into it, then I'm going to have to like be in it, And so tell us a little bit about that, what that looks like for you. And you mentioned just how did you start getting into deep diving into the film like you do, building a prospect board? Like, all of that stuff takes so much time, so much work, so much effort every year. So for you to be kind of going in on that, and especially for like Bengals fans, to be able to look at your work specifically and say like, man, the stuff that Parker does helps me to formulate the opinions that I have about, these draft prospects. Like, that's a huge thing, and that's got to make you feel like some kind of pride for that. So just give us an idea of how you became to be a Bengals fan, how long you've been doing the draft prep, and what that all looks like for you, and give us a little insight into what your shadow team looks like. And
yeah, for sure. So I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. So they were the close team. Just the kind of team I was more familiar with. So once I moved out, out here with my family and kind of started getting into football, between the striped helmets, because I was playing NFL 2K5, so you had the helmet logos as you're picking your team. So I saw the stripes, played with the stripes for a little bit, and then I kind of looked into the team, and I was like, oh, they're from Ohio. They're just from right across from where I was born. Let's just call it a wrap. So I'm a Bengals fan now. And then that was, early 2000s, and 5-10 years later, I was like, man, I couldn't have picked literally any other team, but I guess this is just who I am now. And I've always said, I was loyal to a fault. I had buddies that were, fans of, the Patriots, the Chiefs, whatever it was, the Chargers, the Steelers. And I was like, I'm the Bengals fan. It's who I am. It's who I've always been. It's who I'm always going to be. I'm never going anywhere. Why would I? And just kind of turn into this now, where now I just like football and I'm just sticking with it. So I always get that though. It's like, why are you a Bengals fan out in Utah? And it's funny because I finally found like a couple local Bengals guys. I ended up going to high school with a kid that was just grew up down the street from me back in Lexington. So we both ended up here and we're pals. We talk all the time. But Bengals fans are hard to find. Whenever I see him or see that UK sticker, I always got to try and find him. But that's kind of a fun game. And it's my wife and I joke all the time because we go out to Cincinnati. You walk down the street, you can give like anybody like, oh, who day? And you always get one back. But out here, you look over at some guy like, oh, who day? And they're like, why are you talking? What are you doing right now? It's like, oh, well, different culture out here, I guess. But that's all. It's always been fun. I like being out here. There's no football team out here. I'm not going to be a freaking Broncos fan. I got a buddy that plays for the Raiders, so I always root for the Raiders in my heart unless we're playing him in the playoffs. So, but that's kind of the story there. And then as far as I got into the draft because my buddy actually reached out to me one year and was like, hey, I'm trying to get into evaluating draft prospects. I don't really know how O-line works. Can you watch some film with me? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. So we just kind of ended up like we'd sync up our YouTubes. We'd be on our phones and we'd be on like a phone, like speaker on a phone call, and we just like we hit play at the same time and watch together. And I'd walk him through things, and he'd show me things with certain positions, and we just kind of worked together. And I was like, I mean, if we're breaking down these guys, I might as well just, rank them, and then I can see how I stack up on these other guys and see how it pans out. So I have a couple smaller boards. I think my first board I did was 2020. And then kind of come after that, they slowly got bigger. And then I want to say it was only last year. It was last year or the year before. I was like, oh, I want to see how many prospects I can do. And I hit like 300 and something, which like I realized the following year. So in case you weren't aware, the draft only has so many picks and it's much smaller than 300. And that's how I kind of settled on my 250 numbers, because I was like, oh, well, I'll try and rank, enough prospects to fill out a draft, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Maybe there's a couple extra guys that I find. That's why I'm at 258 this year. There's 252 picks, but I'm at 258 right now just because I had some extra O linemen that I threw in there. And that's kind of just where I'm at now. And then last year I found out about this whole shadow team thing, which essentially, if you don't know, and I feel like I've been like championing my new religion with the shadow team stuff. But essentially what it is you're building a team from scratch, from zero players, with players only from the draft. So you have no free agency outside of undrafted free agents that you pick up after the draft. And you have to try and, build this NFL 53-man roster plus 16-man, 12-man practice squad, whatever it is, just through the draft and through the draft alone. And there's a bunch of different ways people do it. So the way I do it, the way I was set up, the first people that reach out to me like, hey, we know how this shadow thing works. We'll just give you our rules, and you can play by those rules. And so that's the rules I just stick with now. I'm only in year 2. This will be my second draft with my shadow team. But what it is so when your first 4 years, you draft two players per round. And how you draft is you follow along with the NFL draft. And so you're only allowed to pick up who's available. So I picked 5th this year, and I keep joking that I'm going to be in quarterback purgatory forever because the way that our scale works. So you get 2 picks and it's a dice roll. So you have picks 1 through whatever math is, 1 through 6. Wow, that was easy math. Anyway, yeah, like 1 through 6, and then 17 through whatever that would have been. Those 6 picks, and you roll your die, whatever number you get, that's the pick you get. So I got what was it last year? I think I got pick 4 last year. I was like 4-23, and this year I'm 5-22. And so the way the scale works is, year 1, you're 1 through 6, year 2, you're 2 through 7, year 3, you're 3 through 8. So I'm only getting further away from the first overall pick until I get to year 5. And so I didn't pick up a quarterback last year. I'm sitting at pick 5 this year, so I'm probably not getting a quarterback this year unless I take Knicks, which I'm on the fence about right now. And then
you could always grab JJ McCarthy way too early.
Yeah, I mean, if he's even available at 5, if he doesn't get snagged at 4. But I keep joking. Yeah, if there's a quarterback there, I'm taking him. But yeah, anyway. But yeah, so I'm going to be in quarterback purgatory forever until I can get a quarterback in the draft early. So I'm just never going to get the first overall pick. But anyway, so you follow along with the live NFL drafts. I'm pick 5-20. So after the first 4 picks go, you're supposed to get your pick done before the clock runs out like you're an actual NFL team. Obviously, if you can't watch all 3 days of the draft nonstop, back-to-back, you can just go in and just it's all on our system. None of us are getting paid for this. So you have to, just however you feel on the inside. But I stick to it. I go top to bottom, just scroll through, notch guys off my board as they get picked up, and then whoever's available. I've just through these first few years trying to go BPA because, again, you get 2 picks per round. Just go get the best football player and see what you're left with after the first 4 years. But yeah, so anyway, so I'm picking 2 guys per round, so 14 guys in the draft, 7 rounds, and then I get 8 undrafted free agents every year. I think that's just regardless, you always get 8. So yeah, and then you just kind of build your team. So you get 22 guys a year these first 4 years, and after that, you're just down to 1 pick, and then people do like the Madden simulations. They'll import their shadow team into Madden and simulate a season and see how their team does, or sometimes they'll just keep rolling dice. It's whatever you want to do at that point. I'm hoping to kind of start involving salary cap stuff once I hit year 5 forward. And so I can, work that extension game and, this player's really good. So he's getting paid this much money. So now I got to work around that money now. And I was it's like my little GM simulation, but again, you don't get any free agency. You don't get any trades. I mean, again, some people do. I'm not. You get your picks in the drafts and you just have to run with it. And hopefully you're scouting well enough. And again, like I said, I was putting these big boards together and I just wasn't doing a good job. Like 2 years later, and I was like, oh, how'd that player I really like do? And I ended up have to like go on this Google Dive and hit his PFF and see how that's going. But with my shadow team, I've actually linked up with a couple dudes and they have a whole league going. I think they're going to try and have 32 plus teams this year. And they're kind of doing it in the same format as PFF does. They're all 22 fantasy stuff where it's like PFF grade and positional value and whatever those numbers come out to, you get points per week and build your team. And so it's just kind of like a fun thing, but it's also like, hey, test yourself. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and it's all about, hey, how are my players? How's my evaluation process going? And it's so funny because, again, last year was my first year and you would have thought my best position would have been a Trent's position. But my best position was linebacker and defensive back, 2 positions that I have no idea how to watch whatsoever. I just hit the right guys, I guess. My interior defensive line people suck because I got Jalen Redmond and Adetomo Adebawore last year, and neither of them did anything relevant last year. So I'm like, oh, wow, maybe I'm just a fraud. But it's fun to watch. I'm hoping to start doing some YouTube stuff. Yeah. On my own, just kind of like related to shadow team stuff, like, hey, this is how my team works, and just kind of, do a little documentary style, however long I run this thing out of like team building, because team building is one of my favorite things. So
to be able to pair that the draft prospect rankings with the shadow team is actually a really cool aspect because, like I said, I've been looking to get into the shadow team for probably last year and this year. I've been like kicking the idea around, but I know that with my brain, when I get into it, I'm going to be way too into it and my wife's going to hate me for taking on another hobby. Like I already do fantasy football enough. I already watch enough draft content. I already, set up a big party and invite a bunch of people over and cook a bunch of chicken wings for the draft. So like, if I tell her, hey, I got one more thing that I'm going to do related to all this, she's going to probably make me sleep on the couch for a month. But I think that your ability, like with ranking your draft prospects and stuff, to be able to follow through on that and like actually see, hey, these are where I had these guys drafted, and here's how they look 4 years from now on my shadow team or whatever. That's a really cool thing because it gives you the ability to say, oh, I was right or I was wrong. And, you know, regardless of what happens, if you say I was right, then you're like, oh, my process is good. If you say I was wrong, it's like, oh, I just have to refine my process a little bit and see what that looks like. But I think that's a really cool thing. But yeah, Tony, Dusty, do you guys got any closing thoughts?
Well, I know Parker sent me the shadow league thing a little while ago, and I'm gonna be honest, Parker. I looked at it for a few minutes, and I was like, all right, I'll check this out later, and then completely forgot about it. Now you're talking about it, I'm like, damn it! If I should have invested myself a little more, because then I might have some solid input to give on it, but I didn't. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm going to look into it. And you refreshed me a little bit, and I know I have the link that you sent me in my Twitter account. But yeah, that's my bad.
Hit me up anytime, man. I'm always willing to talk about it. And like I said, it's never about, like, for me at least, it's not about like being right or taking the victory lap. And it's funny, I have a buddy that just keeps me humble because I'm always like, oh man, I love that guy. I wanted him so bad. I just didn't end up with him on my team. Like, he's like, oh well, if you wanted him so bad, why is he on your team? Because obviously you didn't want him that bad, or else you would have drafted him. And so it's funny because, you know, you have your guys in the draft, and you have these people that'll take victory laps. Like, oh, well, I told everybody. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I can go out here and tell everybody that a first round prospect is going to be a hit, but how's your team look? And it's funny because there's just a couple people that were in this league last year that I just know and I see around on just, you know, the social media. And so I'll talk to them about players or see them argue about prospects. And it's always like the petty, like, oh, I'm going to go look at your team. Do you actually know what you're talking about with this position? Or like, do I need to like fade that? And it's just kind of like this funny little, you know, again, evaluate your process. I'm not trying to be more right than anybody else. I'm just trying to score the most points in the league. I just want to get starters. And that's where I picked JSN with my second first-round pick last year. And then he got picked up by the Seahawks, so that sucks. I had Bijan Robinson and the Falcons. That was a bust.
Ooh,
just because he was with the Falcons. So it's like that's the fun part, because even if you pick, like, you know, the great prospect that you love, that's your guy, he's the number one guy, then he ends up on some crap team, and it's like, oh well, like, that's not even his fault. Give my man a chance. He has to just give my man a chance. But it just makes the NFL more fun to watch for me. And like I said, I'm a nerd, so I'm just
that's like fantasy football. That's like fantasy football for us. Like we've all played together, and it gives you a little bit of bragging rights, but also it's fun to see people maybe you're high on and in how they do. You said you're going to be in a league with 32 people.
Yeah, so that was the goal. So last year there was only 3 first years, and then it was like kind of a range. There was a couple second years, and like kind of these older guys that have been doing it for a while. And they're the one guy I helped with kind of like data entry as far as like getting PFF grades in for scoring and everything. And he was talking to me about it at the end of last year. He's like, hey, it'd be really cool to like get up to 32 and then like create divisions, and then they have like even like maybe a playoff system and kind of like turn it into more fantasy football. Instead of just right now, it's the whole league against everybody every week. But they're playing around with a bunch of fun ideas. And I've been championing it. He hit me up the other day and was like, hey, I just want to thank you for being, you know, kind of the guy, you know, pushing the charge for the shadow team. Like, yeah, man, it's just fun. I just want to see more people's teams. Like, you don't have to necessarily be in the league, but like if you have a shadow team, definitely hit me up. There's a guy I talk to like pretty much every day. I actually sent him one of my shadow mocks today, and was like, hey man, like, I don't even know, like, did I cook with this or not? It hurts me to pick neighbors over alt at 5 every time I can, but I feel like I can't pass on them. Like, what am I? And it's just fun to talk about, like, hey, this is what my team looks like. What do you think I should do outside of, like, you know, we've been talking about the Bengals pick at 18 for how long now? I've kind of moved on from 18. I've looked at day 2, day 3, day 4. And now I'm like, oh, well, what am I going to do? Because I got 14 picks I got to figure out.
So what's the ideal amount of people to have in that type of league? Would it be like 10, like just like fantasy football, or is it something you could literally just do on your own? Like me, Chris, and Tony could just start it and just go 7 rounds and see what happens with the dice roll.
When I first built my found the idea and wanted to start it, I wasn't even doing scoring. It was kind of just like, I'm going to draft my guys, and at the end of the season, I'll pick up the PFF grades and see how I did, just kind of roll with it. So finding the league was just kind of like it's kind of like a little fun side game. And like I said, it's not like you have your matchup every week. It's just the whole league. And again, because you're going to have like we always joke in the league last year, out of the 12-ish teams we had, I feel like 8 of them have Lamar Jackson as their quarterback. So it's like you're going to run into stuff like that because, again, you're not drafting with the whole league. It's just your own independent draft for your own independent team and then putting it against other people. So, I mean, you can do it by yourself. You can do it with a buddy. You can do it with a small group of people. And again, the scoring, you can do whatever. You don't even have to score. You can just, get their PFF grades every week and see which team had the highest average PFF grade. There's a bunch of ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it's all about team building, right? It's like, can I evaluate my process? What positions am I good at watching? What positions am I bad at watching? Why is that? What traits am I missing out? I mean, that's I always joke that my shadow team's not necessarily for any competition or anything. I always joke that it's my GM resume. So, when I get that call for the job interview, I was like, oh, well, look here at my shadow team of players I've been drafting because I'm a loser for the last X amount of years. Like anybody's going to take that seriously. But that's why it's more for me and just being able to compare it and see other people's teams. And like I said, when a guy's spouting off about prospects, you can go check out his team and see if he's full of it or knows what he's talking about. It's kind of like my favorite part about it is just to see, who were you actually high on? Who were you willing to draft for your team opposed to that first, second round prospect that, was the guy that you didn't even draft because you didn't have faith in him. So
this is all linked back to what you said about, we were talking about kind of intangibles with guys who these guys are really actually trying to be the best at their position. They're putting in the work. They're doing the extra stuff. It's kind of like for just normal dudes like us. I'm not 6'8", 360 pounds, running a 4.9. So I'm not going to be able to get drafted by an NFL team. But this kind of stuff is just so fun to be able to kind of continue what it looks like to be involved and put our passion into football in general, to just kind of dive into the prospects and see where we're right, see where we're wrong, and see where we want to get better at just watching football. Mm-hmm. So it's a really fun thing. And just hearing the passion that you have about it and hearing the way that you're hyping it up, it's like, man, am I not a good fan if I don't do it now? So you've done a great job of being the spokesman.
Yeah, like I said, if you ever put a team together, shoot it to me, shoot it by. I have 3 different templates of teams just because I've hopped around and talked to people about it. So just a good way to organize your team and organize your drafts year over year so you don't lose them. You can always refer back to them oh, hey, I always talk about Ivan Pace. He went undrafted last year. I was going to draft him in the 4th, but just felt like he was sliding. And so I just kind of sat on him. I ended up drafting him I panic picked him in the 6th because I'm if I don't get him now, I'm not going to get him. And they ended up going undrafted. But I'm hey, I could have waited, but I ended up drafting him. But now he's solid. It's I don't really regret the pick, but it's just kind of fun to see stuff like that where it's oh, I was higher than the league on this player, but I ended up being right. Or it's oh, I bought into the draft media, the draft season hype on, I kick myself every day because I bumped Chandler Zavala up my board late because he got all that late run. And I was oh, maybe I'm just missing it. I watched this film, kind of liked it. I was I could see it. I bumped him up and then I picked him up and he did awful, but I was stuck with him on my team. And that's where it's fun too, where you start looking at these guys and it's oh, I'm in year 2. I kind of saw what worked, what didn't work last year. Now I'm more looking for oh, is this guy going to find a way onto the field so I can get some points out of him? Because I can find these guys that I think will develop. But, as far as instant impact for me, I'm trying to find guys that are going to be rotational guys that can hit the snap minimum to qualify for scoring. And it's just team building like that. What strategy you're going to use? What are other people looking at? Where am I weak? Where are you strong? Where's the value? It's the fun stuff. I can talk about it all day. I'm not going to talk about it all night with you guys, but
So you said there's no trading in it, and there's no trading, but can you cut players?
Yeah. So, and again,
So-
people run their teams different. Like I know some teams, some people, if their pick gets traded in, the real NFL, they'll run that trade for them. So they'll pick up the picks, but lose their pick. Again, like I said, I'm just kind of sticking with my picks for now. We'll see what happens later. But yeah, so you pick up your guys and then you have it's called your player graveyard. And I kind of like this concept, at least the one I'm running. So you draft your guys every year. You get your 53-man roster. You have to have 3 specialists because, again, it's an NFL team. You got to find it. You got to go draft a kicker, get a UDFA kicker at some point, and a long snapper, and all that good stuff. And then you have, I think it's a 16-player practice squad, and then anybody else that's extra, you have to cut and put in the graveyard. And I expect it to be pretty easy early on. Obviously, I'm going to get guys that just flame out or aren't even in the league anymore, and those are kind of easy. But the rules, the group that I found, if they hit the graveyard, they're forever gone. You don't get to hit the graveyard and then pick it back up because there's no free agency. You only get a build out of the draft. So once you cut a guy, he's gone. You no longer get to go get that guy, or if he finds the right team and he starts popping off, he's gone now. And I kind of like that concept where it's every year, essentially, you're going to have to make cuts, and it's not like kind of the NFL where I can cut this guy and then go get him off waivers and store him. If you want to stash a guy, you got to keep him on your 53 or your practice squad somehow, and if you can't, then he's gone, but he's gone forever. And I kind of like that kind of finality of it where it's like you have to be convicted that this guy's going to be better than this guy, or else you're going to be kicking yourself. I'm kind of excited to get to that point.
That puts the pressure on, too, because, whenever the pressure's on and you feel like, oh, man, this decision is tearing at me. And then you can look back and you be like, even when you get it wrong, it's still fun to have that feeling of oh man, I wish that I would have done this thing a little differently, or and it makes it feel that much better when you actually do get it right. And, you don't cut the wrong guy and keep this guy on your roster because you thought he was going to be something.
Well, the draft's just so much more fun. I remember last year was my first draft. And it got to my pick, and again, Bijan was the top rated available player on my board. So I was like, oh, I gotta go get Bijan. But I'm like, dude, I don't want to take this first round running back. I probably should go get one of these quarterbacks. So I want to go get a receiver. And then I just saw the clock counting down. I was like, oh crap, I have to freaking pick somebody. I don't. And then again, you go into the draft. It's like, oh, I'll just pick BPA. I'll take the top guy available, not even think about it. And then you get to your pick, and it's like, why is the top guy available? But I also really like that. And so it's kind of fun. It makes the draft exciting. You get to watch, and it's like, oh, my guy's sliding. Is he going to be available? And again, because you're not trading up or down. You're stuck. You just have to wait. Hopefully, he gets there, and that's the fun of it. And then again, you see guys slide like DeJuan Jones and Ivan Pace, where it's just like, oh, I mean, do I think they're going to slide another round? I mean, maybe, or do I take him now? And again, it's just if you're a draft nerd, it's the way to go. It's just I am so excited for next Thursday. I've been thinking about next Thursday for months. It has nothing to do with the Bengals. It's purely oh, I'm so excited to see who I'm going to have on my team. But yeah.
So I know Tony's got to slide out. I got a couple more questions for you. They'll just be rapid fire, Parker. I'm not going to take a lot of time. Tony, you got any closing thoughts or statements?
Nah, man. Appreciate your time, Parker. It's been awesome, man. Looking forward to the draft, and obviously more insight down the road, right? It's interesting to see who they're going to pick in round 1. I think it's going to be a tackle, but I wouldn't be surprised if we go defense as well, to your point with your boy Newton. So.
No, it was good to chat with you, man. Good to meet y'all. Have a swell rest of your evening, and Johnny Newton at 18, brother. That's what we're going.
We'll see you, Tony.
All right, brother.
So, Parker, my question is on that shadow team, the grades that you get, that's just strictly from PFF. That's how you'll rate out your team, is through PFF.
Yeah, that's what we use, because it's kind of a standard system. That way, you don't have one guy fudging his numbers and grading your own players. It's just PFF standard, whether you agree with it or not. It's the standard grading system for the NFL, so it's what we use.
So if you have, if you get 2 picks per round, there's 7 rounds. That's 14 players. if it's year one, like year one starting out, you'll have 14 players. Do you just take the average, just add them all up, divide them by whatever, and then that's your average grade? That's how you get your score?
Well, so you have your 14 players and your 8 UDFAs. Don't sleep on those UDFAs. You're going to need those.
Okay.
Okay.
So you get 10.
So you get 22 people a year on your first 4 years. At least the way we have it set up. And then as far as scoring goes, so like I said, we use it's based off of PFF's like 8 all 22 fantasy system. And so what they did is they assigned positional values to each position, and that includes like, defensive interior 3 or offensive tackle 2 or whatever. Like they have different, like, so even for your rotational guys, because again, you're building a whole 53, so you want to get scored for all of your potential players. And I think you can only score X amount of, anyway, that the scoring I'm still pretty new to, obviously. I can obviously send you links and stuff, but essentially what you do is it's your PFF grade times your positional value, which is why I'm so freaked out about quarterback, because, quarterback's got like because the positional value is essentially the maximum points you can score, and then your PFF grade is the percentage of points that you get out of that number. And so the way we have it set up, it's like quarterbacks like 10.68 is like their max amount of points scored. And then there's 3 positions that are like 5 point something. And then everything else is 4 or less. So it's like your quarterback's like double, like your second best, like scoring player. I don't have a quarterback. And so out of the 3 first years in the league last year, I ended up winning, but it's only because the other 2 guys had Anthony Richardson and he got hurt early. Like I was going to get smoked, and then they lost their quarterback, and I just had so much invested in other positions. I just had enough guys play where I ended up getting points. But that was the fun part, because they just lost their quarterback, and that was all they had as far as points, because they had later round picks for everything else, and I invested early in these other premium positions. That's, again, just part of team building. But yeah, what it is, it's your PFF grade times your positional value, whether you set it yourself or you use PFF system. I can send you all of our stuff too. But
yeah, I'll definitely look into it. I'm sure me and Chris and Tony will start geeking out, and our wives will. I mean, they might like it. We'll get out of their hair a little bit. Do you have any games? You got any games you're coming up to this year?
Oh man, waiting for the schedule. I told myself I would never go to a Bengals game during my coaching season because I didn't want to miss any practices, and both games I went to last year were in season, so we just kind of thrown that out the window now, I guess. But what we're hoping for, what the dream scenario is we can get like a Bengals home primetime game the week before the Tennessee game, and we can come the weekend of the Bengals game and then drive down to Tennessee and hit 2 games and just take a week off of work and then come home. That would be ideal, to get just 2 knocked out and come home. Last year we got lucky because we got free tickets to the home opener, and then we had the Arizona game, which is, just a quick drive for us from here. This year we're not so lucky, I don't think. So we're hoping that we can just, kind of stack 2 together and still get 2 games in, but we'll see. I'll obviously let everybody know when I'm coming out, because I love meeting people. I love seeing everybody and getting out there and enjoying the environment. So if there's a game that it seems like everybody's going to, I'll obviously try to get to that one, except those games are like quadruple the price. So it's a little tougher to get to those, especially when you're, paying for a flight and a place to stay. But I'll definitely be out there. I just don't know when yet.
Isaiah said it's been an awesome show, and Tyler Bowles, he's going to be on the show here, him and his squad here on Thursday. But he says can't wait to meet you, Parker. So hopefully you guys get a link up. My closing thought is, or it's not thoughts, it's another question for you. Your brain's probably rattled with all these, but you got any hot takes for the Bengals season? Any standout players? Anybody that you think is going to maybe take a big leap? Maybe it could be a guy that started last year, or maybe somebody that hasn't started or played many snaps, but somebody you think might have a breakout season.
I mean, if you followed me for any time at all, my take's always going to be Cordell Volson is going to make the year 3 jump. I said it the second he was drafted. I said, don't put first-year expectations on this kid. He's got a lot of technical stuff to clean up. I thought he did that in year 1. Year 2, I was like, hey, this is the year. He's kind of got the technique in. He's getting familiar with the league. Year 2 is the year for it to slow down and so he can start processing better and kind of catch up to NFL speed, which I think we saw at the tail end of last year. And so once you kind of get the technical deficiencies ironed out, the game starts slowing down for you. Year 3 is really when you evaluate, rookie. Oh, not rookie anymore, I guess, but those draft picks, you can finally evaluate how they look in whatever system it is. And that's why the whole thing is after 3 seasons, that's when you can actually evaluate your draft. Don't evaluate after 1, don't evaluate after 2. Let your guys be in the league for 3 years. If they're still in the league after their 3rd season, they've done something right because they haven't gotten cut and they've made it through 3 camps. But then also you can see, have they corrected things, technically? Has the game slowed down so they're able to, move a little quicker and not be caught off guard by everything? Like, how have they developed? And that's where you really see who this player is. So if Cordell Volson comes out this year, I think he's the best candidate to make the big jump because he's got 2 full seasons of starting level play under his belt, opposed to a lot of these other rookies who've either been rotational or even had to take a backseat to certain players. He's got the best chance for the breakout, in my opinion. I mean, obviously you got a new guy like Trent Brown. You got a guy like Yossi Vosh. He could be a big name on this team, especially if they move T. Higgins still. I know that's still up in the air. I do think Zach Moss is another underrated guy that could jump off the page. You got a lot of vets on defense. You got a lot of solid pieces on offense, and being kind of the new guy in the system. I'm not going to say it's going to be Gesicki. That just feels weird. I don't want to say Gesicki's going to be the heart of the offense when he's going to be option 3 to 4 at most. But again, I think Zach Moss and being a better scheme fit and getting, another year into the new scheme that Frank was, not as familiar with, these players were transitioning into. Now you're kind of more solid in your scheme. You have a running back that fits the scheme. You have your, left guard that's going to be hopefully at a solid level that you can expect from him moving forward. You have a new right tackle that you have a lot of faith in. So I just feel like, Cordell Volson and Zach Moss are my 2 guys I expect big jumps from. And I think both of those are pretty hot takes, but that's where I'm at.
So I'm glad you said, I had a feeling you was going to say Volson. Don't ask me why I had that feeling. Maybe it's just because I followed you for a hot while and you're an offensive line guy. But Volson, you're also really high on Zach Frazier. Do you think if we take Frazier, do you think that's going to push Volson to that next level? I mean, I don't know if he's a guy that needs that extra motivation. He seems like a hard worker. He's always with Ted. But overall, could you see Frazier taking that role from him possibly? Or do you think this year is going to be a big standout for him, in taking Frazier would be just a good overall investment in the second round?
Yeah, as much as I've been a fan of Volson since they picked him up and I really dug into his college film and then saw what he kind of did through his rookie year, I've been saying, ever since then, like, still load up on those depth pieces, whether it's more rookies, whether it's, kind of the average level veteran players. Like I talked about Risner last year and I brought him up this year. I talked about Connor Williams this year. You're never going to regret bringing in solid competition. If it just ends up that you have 2 guys that are equal value, you've got to pick who to start. That's a good problem to have. I'd rather be picking the better of 2 players than the guy that sucks less. So I'm all for bringing in that interior line depth. I've said they need to go get 2 defensive interior guys and 2 offensive interior guys and a tackle, which is completely unrealistic. If they come out of this with 5 French players, I'm pretty sure Twitter will explode. But I'd be happy.
That's what I want. 5. Give me 5.
Go get a guy like Frazier. Go get a guy like Beebe or Christian Haynes. Go get a Rosengarten. Go get, Caden Wallace later in the draft. Go get a Delmar Glaze. Maybe you're picking them up and, as undrafted free agents. But
what about Mahogany? How do you feel about Mahogany?
Oh, Christian Mahogany. I don't like him as much as Beebe, but I see the vision. I can see the vision with Mahogany. I think he's got a lower level of play strength than some of these other guys, but I think he works his hands so well and he plays so tight in his frame. Like he's very technical, and I think he's going to do, again, I think this entire interior line class for the most part is a lot of, again, solid floor guys where what they're going to be day one. You just got to see how that translates. Like, how does their level of play translate to the NFL level? And he's a guy where, coming out of Boston College, didn't have a lot of great competition, didn't have a lot of great guys around him, but was always a guy that was standing out. I loved what he did at the Shrine Bowl. again, like just another guy. Go get good offensive linemen. Just get rid of kind of some of the guys that have been sitting in this room, like your Trey Hills, like your Jackson Carmen. Just get him out of there. Bring in some good competition. That even if you're not pressing, Orlando Brown for the starting role, he at least has to worry about something and can't get lackadaisical because he could lose his job. That's where, again, a guy like Bolson, he probably feels pretty good job security wise, but you bring in a guy, hopefully he doesn't pull a Jackson Carmen and just let the rookie take his spot. He actually still fights for that. And through that process, iron sharpens iron. Everyone gets better. And now you have a group of 8 to 10 guys that you actually feel good about if a guy has to miss a couple plays because Alex Kappa got poked in the eye. So now we have to throw a guy in there if we're not all pooping our pants for 3 plays.
I agree. Well, that's all the questions I have, man. I want to give you a lot of thanks. We was on here way longer than I thought, but the conversation was going well, and I appreciate it. I know Tony's not here, and I don't like to speak for anybody, but I feel very confident in saying Tony appreciates the time and answering all these crazy questions we had.
No, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, Parker. We really appreciate you coming on. It's fun to talk Bengals, especially with there's something about talking about the Bengals with guys who are local, but then there's something about talking with Bengals fans from all over the place that just kind of feels like you're bringing people together and you're, just having a good time and connecting with people from different places, which is kind of an additional fun thing about this. But yeah, we appreciate you giving us over 2 hours time. I mean, I said before this podcast started, when we were just talking that I guessed it would be an hour, and we're well past that. But at this point, we should all be much more prepared about what to expect from the draft. Thanks to Parker, and we appreciate your time and your knowledge and your insight. So thanks again for coming on, and thanks again for just all the preparation and all the research and all the film that you watch to be able to talk about stuff in depth the way that you do. Because a lot of people, they want to do it, but they say, there's always things that get in the way. Oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, I don't have enough energy. I don't know how to get the all 22 film. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. But it's kind of like you're helping everybody out to know who they should like, and you influence their opinions. And that's a really cool thing. So
it's kind of like taking one for the team, a little baseball reference, eating a pitch and getting on base. Parker goes and he does all the dirty work for us, and then we just get to pick his brain and then have fun talking Bengals. But it makes me feel good about the Mims pick because Johnny Newton and Byron Murphy, if they're on the board and Mims is the best pick, it makes me feel a lot more confident in what I think about taking one of them defensive tackles, man. But yeah, look forward. Hopefully whatever game you're at, man, I can make it out there and we can hang out and see it. I guess we can cut Parker off, and I got a couple things I'm gonna send out there. Parker, hopefully after the draft, we'd love to have you back on, man. And then we can shout out your shadow league a little bit. see who you took and pick your ear on that if you're down for it. I know you put 2 hours in. You might be like, man, I'm never coming on with these guys again. They'll talk my ear off.
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk ball, man, especially when I'm bragging about my shadow team and how I just absolutely killed this draft, because we all know that's how that's going to go. But no, I appreciate all the kind words. I appreciate you letting me take some time up on your show. Sorry it ran a little long. Sorry I had to go on my shadow team rant that I always have to go on, but I appreciate the time. And like I said, I'm going to try and jump on these tickets early before, I have to buy resale ×3 value. So then the second I get my tickets, I always stick to it. I'll blast it across social media, let everybody know. So hopefully I can get as many people there again so I can meet as many people as I possibly can. But I can't thank you guys enough for letting me come on and just talk football. Like I said at the beginning, I haven't really talked a lot of, draft as much as I wanted to this season. I feel like I kind of dropped the ball in a couple areas. So it's good to just come and talk some football with some guys. And I always joke, you have the guys in Cincinnati, homegrown, 30, 40-year season ticket holder guys. And I've always said, not that I'm better or worse than anybody, but it takes a different dog to suffer through those years across the country when I don't get to go to the games. I'm just having to watch this awesome show of athleticism on TV through all those wonderful years that we all enjoyed together. So, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate Bengals fans. I just appreciate the community we have. And thanks for letting me be a part of the show tonight, man.
Yeah, no, if anybody knows me, I talk forever. So especially when it talks to Bengals, Chris and Tony are always like, hey man, I work night shift. So on my off days, I'm up and I'm like, hey, I'm starting to come into my prime right now. It's 10 o'clock. This is my golden hour. But
warming up.
Yeah, I'm just warming up. But no, we appreciate it, dude. And would definitely love to have you back on. You didn't burn any of our time up. Maybe not. Chris might be getting a little tired, but he didn't burn up any of my time. And
hey, I appreciate it when I'm dead.
Yes, sir. Well, Parker, we'll definitely be in touch, buddy. Once again, we really do appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again, man. How can people reach you? I know you got your Twitter and stuff. You want to plug all your info.
Yes, sir. Yeah, my Twitter at ParkerBlake60. That's where I post literally everything, and I get lectured all the time by people I write for. Like, oh, don't post that. Go write it and post an article. It's better for you to do it that way. And I'm like, I don't like writing, but I can do a little quick tweet. But so yeah, I post everything there. Every article I write, I repost on my Twitter. So if you want to find any of my stuff or my X, whatever, just go there. I do write for All Bengals with James. And then I got picked up by a draft site when I was down in Mobile that I'm going to try and help out with. We're going to try and get a top 50 out for the 2025 class, like the week after the draft. So look, it's NFL Draft Lounge. I'm hopefully going to have some content out on there. But again, just go to my X account, my Twitter account. You can find it there. DM me anytime, especially if you have a shadow team, so I can tell you how horrible mine is and how awesome yours is. But yeah, I'm available. Just come find me.
Right on, buddy. We'll cut you out of here, and we'll get ready to close up the shop. Thank you, Parker. I'll be hitting you up here in a little bit, but thank you very much, man.
Yeah, appreciate y'all. Hooday.
Hooday.
All right, this is my buddy Dylan Jenkins. Me and him work together, so he knows what it's like on long hours when it's just me and him at work talking, and we get tired at night, and I'll just start BSing and talk his ear off because I get bored and tired, man. What else is there to do, Chris?
That's about it.
All right, so a couple admin thoughts. We got a show coming up on Thursday. We got Tyler Bowles and his shows. Oh man, don't hurt me, Tyler. When you see me, it's Rule the Jungle Pod. That's what it's called. Rule the Jungle Pod. There's so many great shows out there. Tyler Bowles, they got a great one. Him and his crew will be on Thursday, 8:30. So we look forward to that. We'll have a little mock draft war. So
dueling mock drafts.
Yep, it'll be Bengals Army versus Rule the Jungle podcast. We'll see who comes out with the better squad. So that's something to look forward to. Also want to give a good deal of thanks to people out there because we're really close to we got to 300 followers on our Twitter. So that's a pretty solid thing for us. I'm happy with that. What do you think about that, Chris? 300 right now? That makes me feel pretty good.
I mean, I'm pumped. That's I think I've said it before on the podcast when we were just starting, but I could talk to a wall about the Cincinnati Bengals. So the fact that 300 people, following the Bengals Army account to hear what we have to say, just a couple of dumb Army cats, you know what I mean? It's fun, and it's a good way to be able to kind of connect with people. It's a good way to be able to connect with, other Bengals fans out there, to just have the same conversations that we have, face to face, but to be able to include other people in it and to be able to hear other opinions about the Bengals. It's always super cool. So yeah, it's just a great opportunity to be able to meet new people and just share the passion and the heartbreak that we have as Bengals fans. So it's always a fun time.
Yeah, obviously we shouted out everyone that watches us and has been following us. We've been starting to grow. We've been getting a good bit of followers and a good bit of people commenting, and that makes it a lot more fun when we can, look over and see these comments, see different thoughts. And we have people on like Parker ask them quality, good questions that maybe we didn't think of. So the comment section definitely helps. We appreciate that. But we also, I got some good shows to write down for everybody. Bengals and Brews, those guys, a couple of my really good buddies that kind of inspired me to start and get a show going. And me, Chris, and Tony was able to put this thing together. And that, a big part of that was for those guys, giving us assistance and help. Also, Bengals Pulse with Mon. Mon's been on a lot. He may be the guy that's came on the most, and he's always a great dude to listen to, get Bengals input. Orange and Black Insider, that's another guy that's way out on the West Coast. Anthony Kazenzo, he came on real early, and that was a really fun show. That was probably a year ago, but Anthony at the Orange and Black, they got a lot of really good stuff. Who else do we have? Cincinnati, Zim Hude came on. We had the Bengalian on. So the Bengals community overall, man, they've been good to us. There's a lot of good, fun podcasts out there to listen to. So the fact that we got so many people that come in and listen to us when there's a bunch of people out there you can listen to, it means a lot, and we appreciate it. What do you say, Chris? Anything? We ready to close it?
100%. Let's close it up, boy. Hooday!
All right. Hooday. And once again, man, thank you and thank you.